A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. I never thought I'd be caught in the middle of a family drama, but here I am, standing in the kitchen, staring blankly at the pasta that didn't really seem to care about my life decisions. My dad had been married to Linda for about 3 years now, and while I'd tried my best to welcome her, I always felt a twinge of discomfort every time she tried to step into the role of mother in my life. It wasn't that she was a bad person. In fact, she was often kind and even funny at times, but she could never replace the void my mom left when she passed away when I was just a little kid. That morning, Linda had taken a moment to sit me down and remind me how important it was for us to bond as a family. "We need to create our own traditions, sweetie," she said, her voice warm and hopeful. I nodded, mostly just processing the fact that I had burned my thumbs while cooking. But inside, I felt like I was being backed into a corner. When she started telling me stories of her upbringing, sharing her formative moments, it felt invasive, like she was rewriting the narrative of my life without asking for my input. It came to a head later that evening when, after dinner, she asked me if I would call her mom at least once, just to make her feel special. My heart was racing, and without thinking, I blurted out, "I'm sorry, but you're not my mom." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the clatter of my fork dropping onto my plate. I watched Linda's face fall, her smile replaced by a look of shock that felt like a physical blow. I could hear my dad in the other room, and suddenly, the air felt thick with unspoken words. Did I go too far? I thought, staring at Linda, who blinked back tears. It was all so confusing. I wanted to comfort her, but I also felt resentful. Did it even matter how she felt? My mom had been my whole world, and trying to fit Linda into that space felt wrong. I couldn't help but reflect on the harshness of my words, but part of me felt justified. After a long, awkward moment, my dad finally stepped in, trying to soothe the tension. "Let's take a break," he suggested, awkwardly glancing between us while Linda excused herself to the bathroom, clearly on the edge of sobbing. In that moment, I felt like the villain of a story I didn't even want to be a part of, as anguish and guilt wrapped around my heart like a heavy blanket. Leaving the kitchen, I felt lost, unsure of what to do. Was I an asshole for being honest, or was I simply trying to protect my own heart? A week passed, and the atmosphere in our house grew thick with unspoken sentiments. Linda was quieter at dinner, and my dad tried to bridge the gap, mentioning counseling, family dinners, and even board games. I wanted to scream that nothing could replace the bond I had with my real mom, but instead, I shoved my feelings deep down, hoping they would just dissolve. One evening, as I lay in bed, I replayed Linda's face, and it haunted me. I realized I did owe her some understanding. She was trying and maybe deserved more than I was willing to give. I gathered my thoughts, and the next day, I approached her, my stomach churning. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice shaky. I watched her expression shift from guarded to curious. Sitting down together, I took a breath. "I think I overreacted the other day. I really appreciate what you're trying to do, but I kind of felt blindsided. I miss my mom." There was a long pause, and then she nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "I miss my mom too," she whispered, and I finally saw her vulnerability shine through the walls she put up. It was the start of something, an understanding that maybe we could find common ground, even if it didn't lead to anything resembling a replacement. Days turned to weeks, and with each shared meal and tentative conversation, I felt cracks in the walls between us. It wasn't easy, but learning to navigate the relationship felt less like a betrayal to my mom's memory and more like a testament to forging my path forward. There wasn't a moment that settled everything perfectly, but we were trying, and that felt like a small victory. So, am I the asshole for telling Linda that she's not my mom? I suppose I didn't mean to be hurtful, but sometimes in the messiness of family bonds, honesty is its own form of love, and over time, I hope we can build something new from it. I think about that moment every day, how it felt to say the words out loud. "You're not my mom, Linda." They hung in the air like a heavy fog, lingering, piercing through the carefully constructed walls of our family dynamic. The first few months of her marriage to my dad had been a whirlwind of clashing emotions and awkward tries at affection. I remember my dad's hopeful smile when he introduced her to me. Part of me wanted to return that smile, wanted to embrace some version of a life where everything felt united once more. But another part, the louder, more stubborn part, stayed rooted in the past, clinging fiercely to memories of my mother. She was the soft voice that soothed my scrapes, the gentle hand that braided my hair before school. Linda seemed, well, different. It wasn't just her name or the clothes she wore, but the very essence of her spirit that stung with discomfort. I hated how right my father was about her. They seemed to fit together like a puzzle piece that didn't belong in the box where my mother once ruled. That day when I stood in the kitchen, silence draping over us like a shroud, I wanted to scream. Instead, I felt an overwhelming need to be brutally honest. I wish I had chosen my words with more care. Maybe if I had couched my feelings in softer tones, we could have sidestepped the devastation that washed across her face. She didn't say anything at first. After what felt like an eternity, she took a deep breath, almost like she was trying to hold back a wave threatening to crash. "I didn't expect to be," she finally replied, her voice breaking slightly, and I immediately felt the heat of regret coat my cheeks. Even at that moment, I could see how deeply this hurt her, wounds colliding in a chaotic dance of raw honesty and heartache. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to hug her and confirm that my heart was in a whirlpool, too. Yet, I felt trapped between my loyalty to my mother's memory and the reality that Linda was trying her best to step into a role she never asked for. How could I reconcile those feelings? The days that followed were heavy, dinner felt tense, silence punctuated our conversations, and I often caught my dad looking back and forth between us like a tennis match. Linda would make an effort, cooking meals with recipes she picked up from my mom's old cookbooks, but I could see that my smile wasn't what she was hoping for. I felt like a walking contradiction. I loved my dad and wanted him to be happy. I wanted to thrive in this new reality, yet I resisted every attempt Linda made, seeing each one as an encroachment on our shared past. After the rough patches, I began to think of all the small moments, the way she laughed easily at Dad's dad jokes, the way she'd gently tease him about his terrible dance moves. It made me search for the good, the genuine attempt to bond. The only way I could make sense of the situation was by journaling, pouring out my confusion and anger onto the pages nightly, letting my thoughts run wild before they bundled into knots of resentment in my chest. It was therapeutic, though sometimes heavy. I penned my memories with my mom, sketched out the ways I still missed her. I also started to write about the moments with Linda that didn't feel so bad, almost like building a scrapbook of feelings I could revisit any time I wavered. The day finally came when I saw Linda sitting alone on the back porch, a cup of tea untouched against the cooling wood. Every part of me hesitated to join her, unsure of how to breach what felt like a chasm that had formed between us. But that little voice inside nudged me, encouraging me to be brave. Taking a deep breath, I stepped outside. "Hey, is this seat taken?" I asked, the words barely more than a whisper. She looked up, surprise etched on her face. "No, it's all yours." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us tracing the outline of our thoughts in the air between us. Finally, I spoke. "I'm sorry about what I said the other day. I didn't mean to hurt you." She turned to me, her eyes shimmering in the soft light, and for the first time, I noticed the vulnerability behind her usual confidence. "I know you didn't. I think we're both trying to figure this out." And there it was, an acknowledgement of the shared struggle, the complexities of our new reality. In that moment, it felt less like a betrayal to my mother's memory and something that might grow. Something new. It began to dawn on me that it was okay to have space in my heart for both Linda and my memories of my mom. Tension still hung in our home like an ever-present guest, but we were learning, piece by piece, how to alter our rhythms into something that did not erase but enhanced. I could let my past stand beside my present. Maybe I'd never call Linda Mom, but I could give her a chance to be something else, a figure carved from shared struggles and burgeoning affection. Every step forward felt tentative, but it was direction. Because sometimes, in the messiness of family bonds, honesty transforms into understanding, and hope quietly takes root. It may not be simple, but amidst the chaos, a soft light flickered, reminding me that the journey is what shapes us. And while I don't have all the answers yet, I know we're figuring it out together, and that has to count for something. But the path towards that flickering light wasn't straight, far from it, actually. Just last week, I found myself seated at the kitchen table, the two of us sharing a dinner that felt far too formal, like we were actors in a play neither of us signed up for. Linda had cooked a lasagna, my mom's recipe, the way she used to make it, with layers of cheese that melted together harmoniously. It tasted almost right, but every bite sent me spiraling back to memories of a time when family dinners felt whole. Chewing was just a cover for my thoughts, and when Linda leaned forward, her plate halfway to her lips, I braced for impact. "You used to love your mom's lasagna," she said, the corners of her mouth betraying a hopeful smile. It wasn't the first time she'd tried to nudge open that door, and my stomach twisted. I blinked hard, feeling this chasm that was all at once shrinking but still wouldn't budge. Yeah, I did, I replied, trying to keep my tone even. Maybe we can, she started, but I cut her off. It's just. It doesn't feel the same now, I admitted, the words slipping out like shards. Regret washed over me immediately, but Linda hardly flinched. Instead, her eyes softened, and for a moment, I recognized that flicker of understanding. I know it doesn't, and I'm not trying to replace her, she said quietly, her voice almost breaking. I miss her, too. It struck me then how odd and beautiful grief can be, a shared experience even between people who should feel worlds apart. My heart tightened, the anger ebbing away, and I realized that we were in the same storm, even if we had different boats. As we navigated those choppy waters, I was surprised to find my guard lowering just a fraction. The tension didn't dissolve, but it transformed, taking on a shape that felt less like hostility and more like something unforeseen. We exchanged stories, her memories of my mom as a stubborn friend, mine as the guiding light in my life. It somehow built bridges over that chasm, filling in the gaps with laughter and remembrance that felt less like an intrusion and more like a tribute. A week later, she asked if I wanted to go to the local farmer's market with her. I hesitated, panic gripped my insides. Was I actually considering spending more time with her? But there was a twinkle in her eye that day, reflecting genuine excitement, and for the first time, I thought maybe it wouldn't hurt to try. Sure, I replied, the word feeling like it was floating between us, fragile yet full of promise. That morning, we walked side by side under the bright sun, the air rich with the scent of fresh produce, and I remember stopping at a stall overflowing with vibrant flowers. Linda picked out a bundle of sunflowers, her fingers brushing against mine as she handed them to me. They reminded me of you, she said simply, as if it was normal. Bright and standing tall. Those words lingered long after that day, threading through the tapestry of our evolving relationship. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a start. I still grappled with feelings of guilt and nostalgia, moments when I'd catch myself longing for that call I could no longer make, a habit of retreating into the secure arms of memory. But every shared moment with Linda peeled away a layer of that discomfort, revealing something underneath, a tentative friendship. As I sit here now, reflecting on all of this, I realize I still don't call her mom. It doesn't feel right, it's too soon, maybe too far-fetched. But there's a warmth that blooms between us, something that still requires nurturing. I've come to appreciate Linda's attempts, and maybe she's come to understand the delicate dance of love and loss that I walk each day. There's room for this new identity we've crafted together, a designation that doesn't aim to erase my past but lifts it up with a new light. So here we are, standing on the edge of something uncharted yet familiar, where understanding begins to bloom in the cracks of our shared experience. And while it's still messy, I'm learning to accept the imperfections and embrace this journey together, one sunflower at a time. The moment my brother Caleb handed me his phone, I felt an inexplicable chill settle in the pit of my stomach. Could you check something for me? I think Jess might be hiding something, he said, his voice barely tinged with uncertainty. Jess had been Caleb's girlfriend for just over a year, and while I had always found her charming and intelligent, there was an underlying tension that seemed to cling to her whenever I was around. It was as if she had constructed an elaborate house of cards in her life, and I was about to be the wind that brought it all crashing down. I sat down on the couch, the familiar scent of fresh coffee and the faint sound of rain tapping against the windows creating a warm cocoon around me, but the gravity of the situation pulled my focus. I opened Caleb's messages, hoping to find some innocent indication of Jess's newfound secret instead of finding any wrongdoing. As I scrolled through conversations filled with typical banter, one unfamiliar name caught my attention. It belonged to a Casey, someone who seemed to take up an unexpected amount of Jess's time, nights spent studying together, late-night texts that were anything but casual. An uneasy feeling settled over me. The more I read, the more a picture of deceit began to form. I felt torn. Jess had always treated me kindly, had welcomed me into their shared world like a sister, yet here I was, caught in the web of someone else's potential infidelity. When Caleb's voice broke through my thoughts, asking what I found, all I could manage was a half-hearted shrug. Nothing, just some study group. But the unease lingered. Over the following days, I found myself looking at Jess through a different lens, noticing the small signs that now seemed glaring, her constant checks of her phone even when she was with Caleb, the way she smiled a little too brightly whenever someone else mentioned Casey. One rainy afternoon, I couldn't contain my curiosity any longer. When Jess called me for a casual lunch, I found the courage to broach the subject in a light-hearted way, hoping to gauge her reaction without being accusatory. So, how's your study group with Casey going? I asked, letting the words hang in the air. For a moment, she froze, a fleeting shadow of panic crossing her features before her smile swiftly returned, though the tightness in her eyes betrayed her. "Oh, Casey? He's just a friend from class. You know how studying can get." There it was, the slight stutter in her tone and the way she looked away. My heart sank. I had to say something, confront her lies head on, but the thought of doing so felt like stepping into a minefield. I convinced myself to keep watching, to gather more evidence for Caleb. Days turned into weeks, and the sense of dread grew heavier, my conscience pulling me in two conflicting directions, one saying to protect my brother and the other warning me to respect Jess's space, the fragile veneer of our friendship hanging by a thread. Eventually, during a family dinner, I found myself sitting across from Jess, her laughter blending into the warm melodies of my parents' bantering. It highlighted the dissonance I felt, like a sour note in an otherwise pleasant song. Caleb nudged my elbow, an innocent gesture that echoed loudly in my mind, reminding me of the precarious balance I had to maintain. The moment finally arrived when Jess excused herself from the table to take a phone call outside. My brother watched her retreating figure, a faint smile on his lips, but I couldn't match his joviality. It was time to take a stand. I turned to him, my pulse racing, and said, "Hey, Caleb, can I talk to you for a second?" I dragged him to the quiet of the hallway, the soft hum of family chatter fading into the background. "I think Jess might be lying to you," I blurted out, my words tumbling over each other, fueled by relentless guilt and desperation. His expression shifted from casual to concerned, then to pained disbelief. "What do you mean?" he whispered, the weight of my accusation hanging in the air like a storm cloud. I hesitated, wrestling with my conscience, but the evidence amassed within me finally burst forth. I recounted my findings, how Jess's demeanor shifted, the text that felt all too personal, the way she avoided the topic when prompted. Caleb's face blanched, his mouth went dry as he processed my words. I immediately saw the doubt sketched across his face, the whipsaw of emotions flashing in his eyes, from denial to anger and finally to the cold, hard truth that lay just beneath the surface. Jess returned just in time to witness the storm brewing between the two of us. The atmosphere shifted palpably, and often the truth is that you don't need a hurricane to reveal how stormy the waters are underneath. A single ripple can cause the greatest waves. When she cornered us, she could sense the tension, her smile faltering, and in that moment, I felt the breath of regret freeze in my throat. The confrontation was swift and brutal, Jess unraveling before us like a fragile thread, her words spiraling into a defensive and contradictory mess. It had taken everything in me to voice the truth, but in the end, I merely felt hollow as Caleb grappled with the aftermath of my revelation. Jess defended her actions as innocent until proven guilty, caught in a lie but refusing to completely break down. Each attempt she made to regain his trust slipped further away, like sand through her fingers. When Caleb asked her about Casey, I could see hope fading in his eyes, replaced with an aching sense of betrayal. By the end of the night, Jess packed her things in a hurried, panicked frenzy, slamming the door of our home behind her, leaving a void that felt impossible to fill with laughter and light. It struck me how quickly a story could change, how slipping revelations could reshape not just lives but the very spaces they inhabited. Weeks passed, and the echoes of that confrontation lingered. Caleb and I lived amidst the silence of grieving for what was lost, both of us tiptoeing through the wreckage of a relationship that once felt solid and true. I thought I had captured a villain in Jess, yet I found myself in an unintended duel with my own integrity and the bonds of brotherhood. Conversations with Caleb were shorter, occasionally punctuated by awkward silences that left both of us feeling raw and exposed. I began to wonder if I had overstepped, if my loyalties to my brother had come at the cost of a friendship that might have merely needed a bit of time and honesty. It was a dangerous game to play, caught between being the good sibling and the potential destroyer of dreams. Yet, as my brother began to heal, slowly piecing together his heart, I learned that sometimes the hardest truths have to emerge to clear the air, no matter how painful. Caleb found solace in time spent with friends, rebuilding his foundation and exploring new paths, while Jess became a memory too volatile to unpack right now. Months later, as winter settled in, snow blanketing our world in peace, I found myself reflecting on that chaotic time. Unexpectedly, I received a text from Jess, nothing substantial, just an apology. It carried the weight of her unburdened heart, a message of acknowledgement that seemed to hum with a quiet sincerity. "I was wrong, Caleb deserves better, and I am sorry for everything." My chest tightened as I contemplated sending it to him. Would he even want to know? Would it open old wounds? In that moment, I realize that life's intertwined paths shape our journey, they twist and turn through relationships in ways we can't always foresee. Perhaps the conclusion lay in forgiveness, not just for Jess, but for me too, for flawing as we all do. With time, the shadows receded, and emotions transformed into memories, leaving us both a little more tender but a lot more resilient. Life continues to curve into unforeseen directions, but I cherish the lesson of honesty in relationships, the quiet understanding that sometimes being someone else's support means asking the hard questions, even if it feels like you're lost amidst the whispers of doubt. And that is where, stripped back to the essence of our shared humanity, we all linger, between mistakes and redemption, in the heart of being imperfectly human. As I reflect on how my journey unfolded, I can't help but recall all the little moments that led me to that fateful encounter with my brother's girlfriend. It had begun as a regular Saturday afternoon, sun-dappled and lazy, the kind where time felt infinite. I was tidying my small apartment, putting on a podcast that spiraled from true crime stories into the endless chatter of Reddit threads, a guilty pleasure I often indulged in while organizing my life. Somewhere in the background, the hosts debated a post titled "A Myth Asshole for Ruining My Brother's Relationship." The words lingered in the air, resonating with my own bubbling thoughts. You see, my brother, Evan, had been dating Mia for nearly a year. At first glance, they seemed perfect for each other, their laughter echoing through family dinners. But as the months slinked by, little discrepancies began to prick at my intuition. I'd catch Mia giving evasive answers during simple conversations. If Evan asked her something seemingly innocent, she'd quickly change the subject or brush it off with a laugh that felt too forced. My protective instincts kicked in, and the more I observed, the more my unease mounted. One evening, I invited them over for dinner, eager to get a deeper glimpse into their relationship. The three of us sat around the wooden dining table, the aromatic smell of baked chicken wafting through the room. As Evan poured glasses of wine, I caught Mia's eyes darting toward her phone like a trapped bird seeking freedom. I tried to pull her into the conversation with stories of our childhood, hoping to bring a nostalgic warmth to the air. Yet, when I mentioned the time Evan tore his favorite t-shirt at the annual family picnic, I saw her brow furrow ever so slightly, and my stomach dropped. It seemed, in that fleeting moment, she had no idea what I was talking about. Intrigued, I pressed on, casually bringing up old family tales, noticing how her smile became increasingly strained. By dessert, she seemed little more than a perfect stranger sitting at my table. The evening wore on, laughter fading into polite smiles, and as the last plate was cleared, Mia excused herself. I was left with Evan, who looked so content, unaware of the unease that had tightened around my chest. I found myself grappling with a moral quandary. Did I bring it all up and risk ruining his happiness? Or did I quietly dismiss the nagging doubts festering inside me? Days turned into weeks, and the lingering doubt settled into my routine like a heavy quilt, suffocating and uncomfortable. I couldn't shake the thought that something wasn't right. Then I stumbled upon a post from a mutual friend on social media, a photo captioned with a location that made my heart race. Mia had claimed to be out with friends that day, but the photograph clearly showed her at a local cafe with someone I didn't recognize, a man, laughing and leaning in closer than friends should. That gut instinct ignited like a wildfire. I felt I owed it to Evan to confront Mia. The next Sunday, I was thrust into the role of an unwitting detective. I invited Mia over under the guise of wanting to hang out, my heart pounding as I collected my thoughts, preparing for what would unfold. We sipped tea in casual silence until the air thickened. I casually mentioned the photograph. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and I could feel every nerve ending in my body come alive with tension. "Oh, that was just a friend from college," she blurted, and I saw in her demeanor what I had feared, a slip, an inflection that rang hollow. "We were just catching up." It would have been simple to drop it there, to dismiss the sick feeling pooling in my gut, but something inside me made me push further. The moment stretched as we talked, dissecting her explanations, and with each feeble justification, her facade began to fray. I found myself caught in an emotional tempest, feeling as if I were standing on the precipice of betrayal from my brother, knowing full well that the truth I sought could lead to devastating consequences. In the end, my apprehension dissipated when Mia confessed, her voice shook, sincerity washing over her. "I didn't want to hurt Evan," she said, tears brimming. "But I felt trapped in our relationship. There's someone else, yes, I've been seeing him, and I thought if I avoided betrayal by lying, it wouldn't hurt him as much." There it was, raw and exposed. She had caught herself in the web of a lie, and the weight of it pressed hard against my chest. I now had the burden of this knowledge not only for myself but for Evan. When I eventually shared everything with him, I felt that peculiar mix of resolve and heartbreak, knowing the path forward was strewn with strife but also clarity. As he processed the news, I felt empathy anchoring me amidst the unfolding chaos. That day would mark the beginning of a slow healing for Evan, a journey filled with tears, and reassessment that eventually led to closure, but more importantly, a chance for him to reclaim his narrative. Reflecting on those events still evokes a cocktail of emotions within me: grief, anger, and ultimately, relief that truth settled in like a balm. Time would teach us lessons, and while I wrestle with the aftermath of having disrupted their lives, I hold on to one clear takeaway: love thrives on trust and honesty. Even as the shadows of uncertainty loom, I am thankful for the light that chased them away, reminding me of the importance of integrity in our ties. And poignantly, I found myself nestled within the web of imperfect humanity, each thread a testament to the resilience of our hearts. This is where I linger now, at the crossroads of relationships and honesty, learning to navigate my own role within life's beautiful, complex tapestry. As I stand at this crossroads, the days slowly unravel, each bringing its own share of contemplation and dialogue, not only with the people around me but also within the quiet corners of my mind. The initial chaos that my actions set in motion has settled into something softer, more contemplative, akin to the lingering echoes of a storm that has passed, leaving only the calm light of dusk in its wake. I find myself revisiting the conversations I had with my brother, Ethan, and Jess, the woman he was dating. She has since become a stranger, not for lack of connection but for the intricacies that emerged when the truth shattered the slightly gleaming facade we had shared. Every time I reminisce about that night, I remember the gentle hum of the ceiling fan above me, casting playful shadows on our faces as we sat around the dining table, the remnants of takeout strewn, forgotten, a faint aroma of spice lingering in the air. It was supposed to be an ordinary get-together, one of those fond reunions where laughter and teasing flew as easily and freely as the drinks. In hindsight, I understand it was those very moments that held the seeds of discontent, edged with secrets and suppressed whispers. The evening turned when I casually mentioned a conversation I had overheard a few weeks prior, settling into the comfort of familiarity. I didn't intend to spark anything dangerous, but when Jess's gaze faltered, a flicker of tension darting across her face, I recognized a vulnerability hidden beneath her polished exterior. I could feel it in my bones. Something was off, as if I had stumbled onto an unseen fault line between friendship and honesty. My words became a mirror reflecting back not only her reaction but also the complexity of each of our lives that felt so simply woven together at first glance. The once warm smiles turned brittle as I sensed uncharted territory emerge, and my heart raced in response, caught in the thrall of worry and confusion. Was I the villain here? How had these simple words unleashed a storm I had barely understood? In the aftermath, Ethan's hurt echoed through the walls of our shared memories, changing their texture, creating waves that rippled through every interaction, leaving me grappling with my own lingering guilt. I had unintentionally stripped away the safety of their shared world, and for that moment, the world felt heavy with uncertainty, casting shadows that felt almost unbearably long. Yet, as time unfurled, I witnessed them begin to untangle their own narrative, seeking solace in honesty that transcended the initial hurt. Watching from a distance, I felt a shift. Ethan, brave and resilient, began to reclaim his agency, powerfully confronting the threads that had sought to bind him in silence. Jess, caught amidst the chaos, sought forgiveness and healing. Her armor had cracked, revealing vulnerabilities that she had hidden even from herself. It was beautiful, and painfully raw, to see two people who loved each other engage in this intricate dance of possibility and renewal. As for me, my perspective widened, becoming a reflective pool where I realized that love is not merely an idealistic construct but a battleground where truths and lies intertwine, a place where both light and shadow dwell. I became a witness to their vulnerability, harboring an understanding that while I had played a part in unearthing the lie that had woven through their relationship, the journey towards honesty was one they had to undertake themselves. I learned that the path to healing is never straight but often obscured by the fog of fear and hesitation, yet it held the promise of growth and restoration. Now, as I sit alone in quiet reflection, the air filled with the soft rustle of leaves outside my window, I understand the importance of navigating these murky waters. I've come to acknowledge that it is often the remnants of past mistakes that can lead us into brighter tomorrows, as we strike a delicate balance between holding on and letting go. Savoring the bittersweet experiences leads us to a deeper communion with our humanity, revealing that perhaps, in the end, we are defined not by our flaws but by our resilience in overcoming them. As I ponder this, I remind myself that even amidst uncertainty, love, raw, honest, and sometimes painful, thrives through the knowledge that we will stumble, yet in our stumbling lies the chance to rise anew. Here, nestled firmly in the fabric of our entwined lives, I find solace, realizing that the heartbeat of humanity, fraught with misunderstanding yet rich in love, will continue to guide us through the ever-evolving journey of connection. I never thought something as trivial as skincare samples could lead to a mini-dramatic saga in my life, but here we are. You see, I'm somewhat of a beauty aficionado. There's just something about the glossy packaging and the promise of glowing skin that gets me every time. Recently, I placed a rather extravagant order with one of my favorite online brands, and in the box, among my beloved new serums and creams, were several freebies, an enticing array of moisturizers, eye creams, and masks. I was practically vibrating with excitement when I opened the package, my heart racing at the thought of testing out all these new products. But then I got a message from my friend Olivia, who I swear has some sort of sixth sense for when I'm hunting for skincare goodies. She casually asked if I'd share one of the freebies with her. At first, my instinct was to say yes. After all, we've been friends for years, and it's not like I wouldn't eventually use them all. But then a little voice in my head started whispering doubts. Olivia has a habit of always wanting something from me. Whether it's borrowing clothes or asking for my food, she rarely offers anything in return, and a seed of resentment was starting to sprout. I poured myself a glass of water and paced my tiny kitchen, considering all these thoughts swirling in my mind. Would giving her a sample feel like giving in? Did that make me selfish? What if this was just one more scenario where I was letting her take advantage of my kindness? I knew it sounded ridiculous, but I could almost hear the chorus of friends in my head saying, "You're not obligated to give her anything." After mulling it over, I typed a hesitant response saying I was really excited about the samples and wanted to keep them all for myself this time. Her reaction was swift and sharp, like a dagger to the gut. "Wow, thanks for nothing," she replied, followed by that pregnant pause of silence that spoke volumes. I could feel dread creeping in as I anticipated the fallout. Days went by in this weird in-between space where I felt nauseous about our friendship. I tried not to think about Olivia scrolling through Instagram, likely wondering if she should unfriend me. The guilt was unbearable. Even though I told myself I was in the right, it didn't feel that way at all. I'd lay in bed at night staring at the ceiling while replaying our conversations in my mind, convinced I had ruined our friendship over a trivial tube of moisturizer. When I did get a call from her a week later, my heart sank. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have snapped at you," she said, and I could hear the sincerity lacing her tone, but part of me still felt vulnerable, hanging on the defensive. I'm ashamed to admit that I let our previous exchanges color my view. We met up for coffee, and rather than bringing it up, I tossed the tension in my back pocket, hoping it would remain there for good. Over lattes and pastries, we slowly patched things up, exchanging laughter and stories of our most ridiculous beauty blunders. Then came the moment I didn't expect, when Olivia leaned in and confessed how she had been feeling insecure about her struggle with skincare lately, always comparing herself to me like I was somehow the beauty guru supreme. That simple moment of vulnerability shifted everything for me. I realized this wasn't just about a tube of eye cream, it was about wanting to feel good enough, not just for others but for ourselves. As we packed up our things and said our goodbyes, I felt lighter, like a fog had lifted. I still didn't give her a sample, but I learned something far more valuable about compassion and friendship. Maybe I wasn't the asshole for wanting to keep a little something for myself, but I'd like to think I could open up my heart a little more, and next time, maybe instead of a sample, I could offer her a different kind of support. We all have our battles, whether they're fought with skincare products or self-esteem, and I think there's enough love to go around if we let it. Sitting on my couch later that evening, the remnants of our conversation flickered through my mind like a movie reel. The sunlight had dipped low, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson, and it was a moment that asked for reflection. I curled up in my favorite blanket, clean and soft against my skin, and I could still hear the gentle thrum of Carla's voice, the way it had wavered just slightly when she talked about her struggles. It had always been challenging for her to navigate the world of self-care, not just in terms of the products we used but in understanding that taking care of ourselves wasn't something we should feel guilty about. I had often hoped to impart that wisdom to her, but my protective instincts had kicked in, convincing me that keeping the samples I earned felt justifiable, especially when I'd put in the effort to justify the splurge. I pulled out my phone almost subconsciously, scrolling through messages and photographs until I landed on one I had saved of my latest skincare haul, beautiful products lined up, glistening in the sunlight, each promising a new layer of comfort and confidence. But the excitement had dulled a little now, more of a reminder than a trophy. Instead of rushing to put it away, I paused on the image, feeling a twinge of guilt I hadn't expected. It was easy to say I'd offered enough just by sharing my thoughts and support, but had I truly been a good friend? What about the little secrets we shared, the plans to embark on a self-care weekend together one day, a day where we'd pamper ourselves without a hitch? I closed my eyes and pictured us at my kitchen table, masks slathered on, giggling as we debated which Instagram skincare trend we should try next, our laughter echoing through the room like a bomb. The thought soothed me, propelling me to realize that friendship wasn't one-sided. Maybe I could bridge that gap of selfishness by reaching out, even in small ways. "Hey, Carla," I texted slowly, "I was just thinking about our plans for a self-care day. How about we do it this weekend? My place, your favorite snacks?" I paused, biting my lip, hesitating over the next part. I wanted to offer more than just casual companionship. I wanted her to know it was reciprocal, that her battles truly mattered to me. "And I can share some of the new products with you if you're interested. We can take a look together." As the message sent, I felt a surge of relief. I wasn't erasing my prior hesitation about sharing my samples, but rather transforming it into something more meaningful, something I could offer that wasn't just a quick fix but a long-awaited connection. It registered as a reminder: vulnerability could be a bridge, not a barrier. Moments later, my phone buzzed with a reply, and I nearly held my breath. "I'd love that. You're the best." I smiled back at the screen, warmth spreading through me. Just as I was about to climb into my own thoughts, a message popped up, filled with an array of heart emojis. My heart swelled as the reality hit me: sharing didn't always mean losing something of myself. Sometimes, it meant discovering a depth of friendship, a bond stronger than any surface mask. I thought of how I would show up for her, next time, not waiting for samples but rather, embracing moments that knitted our hearts closer. That night, I drifted off to sleep with a sense of hope hanging in the air, ready to explore what our little self-care weekend might bring, understanding that every relationship needs nurturing, just like our skin, both requiring gentle care and sometimes, a sprinkle of love. The next day was one for the books, a slow Sunday morning filled with the soft promise of new beginnings. I brewed a steaming cup of chamomile tea, letting the comforting aroma wrap around me like a warm blanket. As I sat on my well-loved sofa, the sun poured through the blinds, casting playful patterns across the room. I thought about how I could turn this seemingly trivial skincare conflict into something more meaningful. It hit me that I could invite Lisa over for a proper self-care day instead of simply waiting for our regular hangouts to become about swapping products. I envisioned a skincare extravaganza, 3 types of face masks, homemade scrubs, and a playlist filled with all our favorite tunes from college. I wanted to create a space where we could laugh, cry, and talk about everything, the gossipy surface stuff and the deeper issues we sometimes skimmed over, tapping into how our battles with skin insecurities mirrored our struggles with self-acceptance. That week, I shot Lisa a text, inviting her over for our self-care extravaganza. I added an emoji of a face mask because who could resist that? To my delight, she responded with a flurry of enthusiasm, and just like that, I felt a little spark of joy ignite inside me. On Saturday, as we prepared for our day together, I set out all my favorite skincare items, the delightful textures, the riot of scents. My bathroom transformed into a mini spa, complete with soft towels and even a couple of candles that flickered gently in the dim light. The setup looked like something out of a trendy Instagram post, but I cared more about the experience than aesthetics. It wasn't long before Lisa arrived, and as soon as she stepped in, her face lit up, a mirroring reflection of my own excitement. We settled onto the floor, armed with our masks and goofiness, and the laughter flowed easily, freeing us from the strains of our daily lives. We tried to put on our masks while discussing everything from work woes to the anxieties keeping her up at night. As we applied our clay masks, I encouraged her to embrace the idea of letting go of those harsh judgments we both had about ourselves. After all, as our skin dried beneath the thick layer, we joked about how ridiculously we both looked. It felt liberating to share our fears, to validate each other's struggles without judgment, just understanding. Yet as I watched her unwind, I realized how deeply vulnerable she was about her own skincare battles, how they seeped into her self-worth like ink on paper. It reminded me of my own feelings of inadequacy, the quiet moments of doubt that clung to me like shadows. More than once during our discussions, I could sense the struggle behind her laughter, that raw need for reassurance. I decided then that this was a pivotal moment. It wasn't about skincare samples anymore. Instead, I reached out, encouraging her to talk about the things we often sweep under the rug, all while the masks effectively dried on our faces. Toward the end of the day, When we both peeled off our masks and wiped our faces clean, I noticed something different in Lisa's demeanor, a lightness about her that hadn't been there when she'd arrived. Perhaps it was the masks, or perhaps it was the genuine connection we had fostered throughout the day. I realized that this was what friendship could be, supporting each other, peeling back layers of our insecurities together, and sharing not just products but our vulnerabilities. As our day came to a close, I felt a mixture of gratitude and fulfillment. I had opened a new chapter in our friendship, and now we both understood that sometimes, sharing our truths could be far more impactful than sharing physical stuff. She left with a parting hug that felt solid and grounding. I watched her walk away, and I couldn't help but smile. It was a beautiful reminder that while skincare might enhance our outer glow, it's the bonds we cultivate that truly illuminate our hearts. Weeks later, I'd often find myself reflecting on that day. I knew I had not just extended an invitation for a skincare session but rather created a framework for deeper conversations in our relationship. Just like the careful balance of ingredients in a skincare product, I understood that the delicate nature of friendship needed a mix of honesty, kindness, and a willingness to show up. I felt lighter, more connected, and ready for whatever life would throw our way, because maybe, in the end, it's not about the samples we hold on to, but rather the moments we create that keep our souls nourished. I've always prided myself on being a generous person, but the last few months have turned that belief on its head, and now, I find myself questioning my own values. My girlfriend, Rachel, and I had been together for just over a year when she broached the subject of her kids needing cars. Now, let me clarify, Rachel has 2 children from a previous marriage, Jenna, who is 15, and Max, who is 13. From the moment I met them, I felt an instant bond. Jenna had this fierce spirit, often caught between her childhood and looming adulthood, while Max was a whirlwind of energy, always looking to make people laugh. Sharing time with them was pure joy. Yet, as Rachel's kids got older, the conversations inevitably shifted to the need for independence. They wanted their own rides to school, friends' houses, and extracurricular activities. It was an ordinary Thursday when Rachel casually said, "You know, I've been thinking the kids really need cars to be more independent. Wouldn't it be great if we could pick something up for them?" At first, I chuckled, thinking she was joking. Surely, she didn't expect me to dive into a discussion about buying 2 cars just like that. But when I saw the look on her face, half serious, half hopeful, I realized this was no lighthearted suggestion. I could feel the knot tightening in my stomach as I recalled my own struggles. I was still paying off student loans and saving to start a life of my own. I hesitated, my mind racing through various possibilities, trying to balance my own financial responsibility with the desire to support Rachel and her family. The conversation became heated, but I remained calm. "Rachel, I love your kids, but I can't afford to buy them cars. It's just not realistic for me," I explained, choosing my words with care. She seemed taken aback, disappointment settling in her eyes. "I thought we were in this together," she said softly, and I felt an unwelcome sting of guilt. It wasn't just the idea of cars, it was the unspoken tension between a partner who wanted to share burdens and a guy who was barely keeping his head above water. Over the following weeks, the tension lingered. I noticed subtle changes in Rachel's demeanor. She became quieter, often lost in thought. On one occasion, while driving back from a family dinner, Jenna asked casually if I was going to buy them cars. I felt a sharp pang in my heart, not wanting to disappoint her but also knowing how strained my finances were. "It's complicated, Jenna," I replied, hoping to deflect. The laughter we used to share felt overshadowed by unspoken expectations and misunderstandings. Around this time, I took a hard look at myself and the relationship. I adored Rachel, and these kids meant the world to me, but it seemed I was inadvertently stepping into roles I wasn't ready for. I loved that Rachel envisioned a future where we united our families, but I had to be cautious about my own needs too. I chose to clear the air. "Rachel," I said one evening, taking her hand, "I care about you and your kids, but I also have to think about my financial goals. I'm not saying I won't help out in other ways, like giving rides or supporting them, but I can't commit to buying them cars." As I confessed my frustrations, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Rachel listened quietly, her expression shifting from disbelief to understanding. "I get it," she said finally, her voice softening. "Sometimes I forget you're still figuring things out for yourself." I could sense the relief in her voice when we turned the corner, leaving anger and disappointment behind. From that point forward, our relationship evolved. I started finding ways to help Jenna and Max without putting myself in financial jeopardy. We worked on small projects together, and I even taught them how to save up for things they wanted. Months later, I received a message from Rachel that made my heart swell. The kids are working on their savings for cars. I think they've adopted your advice, she wrote, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of them taking initiative. As we sat together that night, reminiscing over our journey, it became clear that we had come a long way. Though my situation hadn't changed much financially, I was at peace knowing we had built a stronger bond through honesty and support. Reflecting on it all, I found comfort in the notion that relationships aren't about merely giving, they're about growing together through adversity. I had feared being seen as selfish, but in the end, what transpired reaffirmed a truth: it's important to recognize one's own limits and communicate openly. I was still part of their lives, just in a different role. And as I fell asleep that night, I felt grateful for the love we had cultivated amid uncertainty, looking forward to all the moments yet to come. Update: a few weeks later, Rachel and I sat down with Jenna and Max to discuss plans for their first car. Instead of just handing them cash, we organized a small family project, painting and refurbishing an old car Rachel's parents had. The kids were ecstatic and learned invaluable skills throughout the process. Watching them work on something they could own ignited a sense of pride in them, but more importantly, it strengthened our bond as a family. In the end, it was about much more than just the cars. It was a lesson in responsibility, independence, and support that we would all carry forward. As the days turned into weeks, our little project blossomed into something more than just a car refurbishment. It became a way for Jenna and Max to understand the value of hard work and teamwork, lessons that would follow them into adulthood. The garage was filled with a blend of laughter and the occasional argument over color choices, tools, and who was in charge of what task. I found myself laughing more than I had in years, feeling like a part of something bigger as I watched Rachel cheer them on, wiping her hands on an old rag and beaming with pride. One Saturday, I suggested that we decorate the trunk with positive affirmations. Each kid could choose a quote that inspired them. Jenna picked "Believe in yourself," while Max, still a bit of a jokester, went with "I fixed it, so I own it." Rachel and I scrambled to find some old paint and brushes, and soon the trunk of the car emblazoned with their chosen words became a family masterpiece. The act of creating something that was truly theirs, a canvas on wheels, made Jenna and Max light up in ways that store-bought gifts never could. I remember one afternoon, after splashing paint around and making ridiculous faces while trying to channel my inner artist, Jenna turned to me with her bright blue eyes shining. "Will you help us do this again someday?" she asked, her voice earnest. I nodded, caught up in the moment. "Absolutely. This can be the first of many projects. We'll build cars, tree houses, or even go-karts, whatever you can think of." The commitment struck me as I spoke. The weight of my words settled in my chest, but it also felt electric, like I was weaving threads into our growing fabric of family. As the weeks continued to pass, we worked diligently, putting in time every weekend, replacing parts, and learning about the engine. I took on the heavier, more technical parts while Rachel guided the kids through the finer points of sanding and painting. Each task was a chance for Jenna and Max to ask questions, and for us to share stories of our own youthful follies, like the time I managed to get my first car stuck in a mud pit because I thought four-wheel drive meant you could drive anywhere. One evening, while we cleaned up after a particularly messy painting session, I was surprised to see a glimmer of uncertainty appear in Jenna's eyes. She had always been the more confident of the two, but tonight, something was off. "Are we doing it wrong?" she muttered, glancing at the splatters of paint that dotted the ground, some bold strokes that had landed on her shirt. It struck me then just how important this whole experience was to her. If the car didn't turn out perfect, would that mean we had failed some unspoken test? I knelt down beside her, resting my arms on my knees. "What do you think?" I asked gently. "Does it feel like we're working together? Are you having fun?" She frowned for a moment, staring at the paint on her shirt and considering. "Yeah, but the car needs to look perfect." "Jenna," I said softly, "life isn't about being perfect. It's about learning, growing, and having fun along the way." I watched as the words sank in, her expression slowly shifting toward relief and understanding, like the clouds lifting after a storm. Finally, the day came when we would unveil the refurbished car. We had all worked tirelessly, and the anticipation electrified the air as we gathered in the driveway for the big reveal. The sun shone down, catching the bright colors that adorned the car's surface in a way that made it look almost magical. Rachel stood beside me, her hand clasped in mine, her eyes glistening with excitement. Jenna and Max stood in front of the vehicle, their faces a mixture of disbelief and sheer joy, and as they reached out to touch their creation, I felt a surge of pride that ran deeper than I expected. Jenna joined Max in jumping up and down, squealing with happiness, and Rachel and I exchanged a glance, a silent confirmation of what we had built together, not just in terms of the car but within our family unit. I knew this was a moment they would remember, a fragment of time marked by laughter, creativity, and the unwavering bond we shared. Later, as we took turns behind the wheel on a quiet street, what struck me wasn't just the shiny paint or the engine purring, it was the way Jenna and Max discussed their plans for their driving future, each word a reflection of their blossoming maturity and sense of responsibility. I couldn't help but smile, thinking back to the conflict I had initially faced regarding whether or not I should buy them cars. The struggle had been real, but what we gained was immeasurable. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of fulfillment wash over me, a warmth that spread from my chest to my fingertips. In teaching them the value of ownership and effort, I found that I was learning alongside them. Suddenly, our pastime projections morphed into a bonding experience, a way for Rachel and I to not only build cars but to build a family, brick by cherished brick. A week later, I received a message from an old coworker who wanted to update me about a job opening. The idea of returning to work jostled around in my brain, but I barely thought about it. Something deeper was stirring within me. The realization that I didn't need a high-paying job to feel fulfilled came to me like a whisper. I had discovered a different way to be present, engaged, and genuinely happy. Although our yard was filled with laughter from our car projects, I had also conjured an understanding that family was not just defined by blood, but by the memories we created together. Several months later, as our car adventures continued to unfold, Jenna and Max decided they wanted to do something special for Rachel and me. One afternoon, they surprised us with a picnic in the park, complete with sandwiches and homemade cookies that had some very creative, but slightly chaotic icing. We laughed as they took charge of the basket, and as we settled down beneath a tree, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As I watched the kids run around, their laughter a melody of joy, I realized that I would never trade these moments for material things. I might not have given them cars without conditions at first, but I had given them the tools to navigate life more effectively, which would prove to be far more valuable in the long run. Reflecting on everything, I realized that though my initial hesitation stemmed from wanting to be a responsible adult rather than a flashy type, it had led to something far more profound, and although I would probably always be the one saying, "Let's paint the trunk," I had also become the dad who could tell a joke, share genuine pieces of wisdom, and make memories that would last a lifetime. Sometimes, I would hear Jenna and Max reminiscing about our adventures, and I couldn't help but feel that we were building not just a family of the future but a legacy, one filled not just with cars but with the cherished stories of our lives. As the days passed, our weekends became filled with laughter, paint splatters, and the smell of motor oil, a unique blend of chaos and joy that transformed our garage into a makeshift workshop and a haven for memories. Rachel would often send me gentle nudges of encouragement as I attempted to wield a wrench while Jenna and Max handled the power tools with surprising finesse. Each time they'd succeed in fastening a bolt or sanding down a rough edge, their smiles would widen, the joy resonating in their eyes as if they'd just conquered a mountain. These moments were powerful reminders of how quickly they were growing up, and each project fueled my desire to be more present and supportive in their lives. One evening, as dusk began to settle in, we found ourselves sprawled out on an old blanket we'd tossed in the trunk while we waited for paint to dry. The kids shared their dreams. Jenna wanted to travel the world and write stories of her adventures, while Max, always the jokester, mused about becoming a famous comedian. As I listened, I realized that this experience was about more than just cars. It was forging a foundation for their ambitions and aspirations. Weeks later, the old car began to transform. It was no longer just a rusted frame. It became a vibrant representation of teamwork, laughter, and shared sweat. We painted it in bold blues and cheerful yellows, mixing colors as if each swirl of paint was a thread in the tapestry of our newly formed family. Friends and neighbors stopped by, often asking if they could lend a hand, turning our small project into a community affair. One Saturday afternoon, while the kids and I painted the hood, Rachel appeared with freshly baked cookies, and her eyes sparkled with pride as she watched us. I felt a warmth in my chest knowing that I was no longer just a boyfriend to her. I had evolved into a partner and a father figure, nurturing the lives around me with kindness, patience, and a whole lot of love. When the project finally reached completion, the sense of accomplishment was palpable. The day we unveiled the finished car was nothing short of magical. Jenna and Max jumped up and down, their faces lit with astonished delight as we took a family picture beside the newly restored vehicle. However, with this joy came an underlying anxiety rooted in my mind. Would they expect the same kind of effort and commitment forever? What if life became too busy, or what if the bond we had nurtured began to unravel? I discussed these uncertainties with Rachel one quiet evening when the kids were snugly tucked in. We illuminated the room with soft light, a warm cup of tea in hand, and she shared a reassuring sentiment. "It's normal to worry," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "But remember, it's not about the cars or the crafts. It's about creating a space where they feel valued and supported, whether it's with paintbrushes or just by listening to their hopes. They'll remember the love, not just the projects." Her words resonated deep within me, and I realized she was right. These kids, Jenna and Max, were resilient and adaptive, just as life would need them to be. My role wasn't to guarantee a perfect scenario constantly, but rather to be their constant support through life's uncertainties. As days turned to months, I witnessed their confidence blossom, not just in their abilities with mechanics but also in their schoolwork and friendships. They naturally began taking leadership roles among their classmates, eagerly engaging in school projects. Each time they tackled a new challenge, I felt a surge of pride that they might carry the values we cultivated through our weekend car projects into the rest of their lives, providing a sense of direction only strengthened by the love we built together. Reflecting on this journey, I found clarity in accepting my title as dad in their lives, embracing the role with open arms. As winter approached, and car maintenance became less frequent, we shifted our focus to indoor projects. Jigsaw puzzles and game nights filled the house with energy. The old car stood proudly outside, an emblem of our collective achievements and the dawning of a familial bond that felt everlasting. I often pondered the future but found comfort in knowing that our legacy would consist of more than material objects. It would be woven with the stories of resilience, compassion, and unwavering support that would carry us through any trials that lay ahead. Update: fast forward several years, and the old car became a treasured memento. Jenna and Max took it to prom with their friends, painted stars on the roof, and filled it with memories I knew would last them a lifetime. And as Rachel and I watched them drive off into the night, her hands securely clasped in mine, I felt overwhelming gratitude for every moment, good and bad, that had brought us here, a beautifully imperfect family, ready to face the world together, one adventure at a time. I never thought that my home-cooked meals would become a point of contention, especially when it came to my boyfriend's kids. When I first met Jake, he mentioned he had 2 children, and I braced myself for the whirlwind that would follow. But I didn't expect to fall in love with their chaotic energy. They were just 10 and 14, and while I found their quirks endearing, I was constantly reminded that they were also master negotiators, especially when it came to mealtime. It all came to a head one Sunday evening when I decided to whip up a hearty vegetable stir-fry. I'd spent a good 2 hours chopping veggies, prepping rice, and stirring in a homemade sauce, humming happily to my playlist as I filled the kitchen with mouth-watering aromas. When I set the table, I felt a sense of pride. Jake's kids, however, traipsed in and paused as if I had served them something alive. "What's that?" The younger one, Lily, wrinkled her nose. "Ew, I'm not eating that." The older one, Ben, joined in. "Yeah, can we just order pizza instead?" My heart sank. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was a new family dynamic, and kids have a knack for testing boundaries. "Guys, I really put a lot of effort into this, and it's what's for dinner. You can eat it, or if you're not hungry, that's okay too." My voice was calm, but internally, I wrestled with a potential backlash. There was a powerful silence, thick with disbelief. I felt the stakes rise as they exchanged glances, confusion and defiance dancing in their eyes. "But it's gross," Lily protested, sinking into her chair with arms crossed. Anger flared up in me. Was I supposed to cater to their every whim? I felt a wave of frustration as their protests grew louder, but I forced myself to stay grounded. "Look," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, "I get that it's not your favorite, but you're old enough to try new things. How about just one bite? You can always have dessert afterward." The quiet stretched. I was ready to crack if they kept it up. The moment felt critical, like a lit fuse that could either fizzle out or explode. Finally, Jake stepped in, looking concerned as Ben and Lily glared at me. "Hey, lifelong battle with vegetables aside, can we at least try to support each other?" he said, trying to lighten the moment. With dramatic sighs that could shatter glass, they slid their forks into the stir-fry, which I must admit looked inviting enough. As they reluctantly chewed, I could see them grimace, but something unexpected happened next. Ben declared it almost edible, while Lily muttered that she could tolerate it if it meant dessert. We ended on a humorous note, and as the dinner progressed, I found myself laughing alongside them, the earlier tension dissipating. However, the aftermath gnawed at me. Had I overstepped a boundary? Was I that tyrannical figure in their lives that made mealtimes a game of compliance? Later, after I tucked the kids in, Jake brought up our earlier standoff gently. His hand warming my back. "I think you handled it well for a first time," he said. "It takes time for them to accept a new routine, you know?" I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Although I felt uncertain, a part of me appreciated that I stood my ground in an unfamiliar parenting territory. Sometimes cooking for a family is more than putting food on the table, it's about navigating new personalities and expectations. If I ever end up becoming a real part of their lives, I would need to find that balance between discipline, understanding, and letting them choose their battles. I'd like to think I'm on the right track. I might even try another stir-fry next week, but not without a little prep work and maybe a fun cooking session with them beforehand. I'd want them on board, not just as a meal plan but as part of this crazy family journey we were on together. As I sat at the kitchen table, the remnants of last night's stir-fry still lingering in my mind, I couldn't shake off the feeling of uncertainty about how to move forward. The whole idea of being with someone who had kids was both exhilarating and daunting. I tried to visualize family meals as these blissful moments, laughter ricocheting off the walls, but in reality, I had clashed with Chris's kids over food more often than I'd care to admit. 11-year-old Ava had her heart set on pizza, the classic kid's choice, while her younger brother, Max, preferred nothing but chicken nuggets. And so, standing at the stove last night, chopping broccoli and bell peppers, I felt my resolve wane. "Eat what's for dinner or don't eat at all," I'd said, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. The words had slipped from my mouth before I could catch them, a hardline stance that resonated into the silence of the kitchen, slicing through any chance of warmth. I understood it was unrealistic to expect them to embrace my culinary enthusiasm overnight. I thought about it long after dinner, my stomach heavy with the green beans I'd forced myself to eat, and I just couldn't shake that gnawing regret. Had I been too harsh? I would define my approach as teaching them to appreciate food, but in what way had I truly connected with them? After they had left the table, I contemplated the gap that had formed. Chris had tried to mitigate the situation, reassuring them and promising pizza tomorrow while sending me a poignant look, part apology and part "what were you thinking?" I understood he was in a tricky position, caught between his partner and his kids. That moment of clash weighed heavily, not just in the context of dinner but in the greater effort of blending our lives. I loved Chris, and I could see why this family meant the world to him, but after our first big rocky dinner together, I felt more like a bumbling intruder than a partner. The truth nagged at me, I craved connection, not confrontation. The shimmering vision of us coming together over a shared meal felt threatened by my own missteps. Were my expectations too high? I could sense my friends' voices echoing in my mind, suggesting a more lenient path, one that allowed kids to express their preferences without feeling bullied by adult tastes. I mulled over the idea of a pre-dinner meeting, a vote, perhaps? Pizza, stir-fry, or even tacos? I could picture the kids researching together, scrolling through recipes, maybe even sharing their wild ideas with me while chuckling over imagined concoctions. The next day, as the sun peeked through the kitchen window and spilled onto the counter, I took a deep breath and texted Chris. "Can we set a family dinner meeting tonight? I think it could be fun. Just the kids and us, no pressure." To my relief, he responded almost immediately. "Sure. I think they'll love it." I felt hope flutter within me as we assembled that evening around the kitchen table, the atmosphere different already, with art supplies scattered across one side as a backdrop to our conversation. "Okay, team, before we plan our dinner, how was your day?" I asked, trying to start light. Max was engrossed in his drawing, which was surprisingly good, while Ava had found a way to channel her impatience into a few clever comments about vegetables being growing food. We talked and laughed, and slowly I noticed a change in our dynamics. When I suggested we had to make a plan for the week, they didn't immediately groan. Instead, Ava perked up, saying, "Can we have taco night? We can make them." And just like that, the children were engaged. They reveled in the idea of crafting their own tacos, discussing toppings, and experimenting with what they'd like to adorn this new creation. I felt a warmth bloom in my chest, that elusive sensation of family forming the way broth warms soup. I took a step back and decided to let them lead. After all, cooking was a journey, not a destination. Dinner rolled around the next week, and together we peeled avocados, shredded cheese, and dashed spices back and forth like our own culinary dance, the kitchen buzzing with chatter and laughter. Chris must have felt the shift too, because his smile spanned ear to ear as he watched the three of us concoct our masterpieces. That night, not only did we eat together, but we also forged a deeper sense of understanding. As I watched Max carefully pile his toppings, his face a mix of concentration and delight, I realized this was more than just about making meals. This was about making memories, bridging experiences, and, hopefully, inviting them into my world just as they welcomed me into theirs. A week later, while we all sat on the couch, the remnants of dinner still wafting through the air, Ava turned to me and asked shyly, "Can we try that stir-fry again next week?" I chuckled, knowing she had probably come to accept that sometimes we have to eat things we might not prefer. "Absolutely, if we can do it together," I replied, feeling a soothing sense of victory wash over me. As I leaned back and heard their laughter fill the room, I finally recognized the beauty in our shared chaos, a family finding its rhythm, with all its flavors, challenges, and laughter. The journey ahead, filled with learning and experimenting, felt like the perfect adventure. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a threshold together, from mere coexistence into a budding family dynamic that was starting to feel genuine. Each evening, the dinner table became more than just a place to eat, it transformed into a communal hub of laughter, arguments over whether to have chicken nuggets or homemade tacos, and surprisingly deep conversations about their day. I found myself cherishing the little moments, the way Oliver would scrunch his face at broccoli but listen while I told him about how important it was for his growing body, or the way Ava started to try new foods, albeit slowly, but it felt like small victories on this journey of culinary diplomacy. One particular Saturday, we took my idea of a cooking session and made it a whole event. I took them to the local market, and it was incredible to see their eyes light up at the array of colors, bright red tomatoes, vibrant orange peppers, and greens that looked like they belonged in a painting. The way they picked out their favorite ingredients to create our next family meal made me feel like we were all inches closer to blending our lives. The joy wasn't just in the act of cooking, it was in each tiny choice they made, how their personalities shone through. As we prepped dinner that night, laughter echoed along with the clattering of pots and pans. There was flour everywhere, Ava had managed to get some on her nose, and even Oliver, who had once been wholly indifferent toward helping, had a spatula in hand, flipping pancakes with a kind of determination that made me proud. I wanted to capture that moment forever, the three of us dancing around the kitchen like we owned the place. As we sat down together with plates filled with pancakes drizzled with syrup and fresh fruit, the atmosphere was warm and inviting. My heart felt full. Yet, amidst the laughter and antics, something did gnaw at me. I was reminded of that initial conflict. Should I have been firmer with my expectations? It danced in the back of my mind like an uninvited guest. I recalled the times I made comments about their choices or pushed them to embrace something they initially refused. I wondered if I was setting them up for failure in adapting to a household that didn't bend to their every whim. I let it linger in my thoughts, willing to explore the line between being a nurturer and a figure of authority. But every smile from them, every bit of that sincere joy we created together felt like an affirming hug around my doubts. That upcoming week, we tried the stir-fry together. They didn't just help, they took ownership. Ava insisted on chopping the vegetables, creating little shapes out of the bell peppers like they were pieces of art, and Oliver surprised us all by deciding he wanted his pieces a bit bigger because, in his words, everything tastes better in massive bites. Watching them engage in our meal with excitement and investment settled something deep within me, the realization that as challenging as it might be to find the right balance, it was also utterly rewarding. I felt like I was gaining not just their trust, but a glimpse into how our little family was beginning to develop our rhythm, a rhythm that celebrated our mismatched notes as much as the harmonies we found along the way. Fast forward to a sunny Sunday a few weeks later, and I found myself standing in our kitchen, a vibrant smell wafting through the air as we prepared an extravagant dinner meant to celebrate the end of the week. After weeks of navigating some bumps and missteps, the kids still had their moments of pushback, but I had noticed they were beginning to voice their preferences more constructively. As I was stirring a pot, Ava casually shared how she appreciated being listened to during our cooking sessions. Oliver chimed in that he liked knowing he could suggest things without judgment. It hit me harder than I expected. Here, amidst the flour and chopping boards, we were building something real. Reflecting on it later that night, I realized I had been questioning myself an awful lot. What age do you cross from merely being a parent figure to someone they could genuinely trust? The love I felt for those two kids grew each day, and the connection we forged deepened beautifully. Maybe, just maybe, family really is about creating a safe space, where all the flavors are welcome, where every spice has its purpose. I laid in bed that night, the remnants of laughter still echoing in my mind and warmth radiating from my heart, and for the first time, I believed we were truly becoming what I had always imagined we'd be, a family. I never imagined that losing weight would lead to me being in the middle of a workplace drama, but here I am, sharing my story, hoping to find some clarity. Just a few months ago, I was sitting in an office cubicle, feeling overwhelmed and self-conscious, my body holding on to extra pounds that I had come to accept as part of me. But after a serious health scare, I decided to get serious about my fitness. I spent countless hours in the gym, swapped fast food for salads, and traded late-night Netflix binges for evening runs. Gradually, the scales tipped in my favor, and before I knew it, I had shed nearly 30 pounds. With my newfound confidence, I felt ready to take on the world, or at least my job at the marketing agency. As my clothes started to feel comically oversized, I figured I could do something nice with them. Enter Jenna, one of my coworkers who had been struggling with her own weight issues. We had shared a few conversations where she spoke about her desire to lose weight but was struggling to find motivation. One afternoon, as we sipped our afternoon coffees, I jokingly offered her some of my old clothes, their vibrant colors ready to be appreciated by someone who needed a confidence boost. Her initial reaction was laughter, and she brushed off the idea, but I could see a flicker of interest in her eyes. It felt good to offer her a lifeline, a way to feel better about herself without the financial burden of new clothes. However, I didn't anticipate the controversy it would stir. The next day, I approached her again, this time presenting a neatly folded pile of blouses and blazers from my closet. "I really think you'd look great in these," I said, feeling a bit sheepish but genuinely hoping to help. But then, her face fell. "I appreciate the thought, but I really don't want your hand-me-downs," she replied, her voice tight. I felt my heart sink. I was only trying to be helpful. But Jenna's discomfort didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I started to notice a shift in our interactions. She became distant, not just with me but with the whole team, as if the mere act of my offering had changed the energy in the room. I found myself questioning everything. Did I overstep? Was I the insensitive jerk that some pieces of the office gossip suggested? I thought things were innocent enough. I only wanted to share some clothes that I wasn't using. Days turned into weeks, and all our mutual acquaintances began commenting, whispering about my offer that had supposedly hurt Jenna's feelings. Each time I heard someone mention it, I felt a sting of regret, swirling like a storm in my gut. I wanted to reach out again, to clarify and apologize, but whenever I saw her in the break room, my heart raced, and I clamped my mouth shut. I worried about being seen as the villain instead of the supportive coworker I aimed to be. My stomach ached, and I felt all the confidence I had gained slowly begin to slip away. Finally, after a particularly tough week where the tension was palpable in the air, I decided enough was enough. I needed closure, not for my sake but for Jenna's too. I invited her for coffee, just the two of us. I took a deep breath, my heart drumming loudly as I sat across from her. "Jenna, I'm genuinely sorry if I crossed a line. I only wanted to help." She looked at me with this mixture of sadness and frustration, and for a moment, silence filled the space between us. Then she spoke, softer than I expected. "It's just, I've been struggling, you know? And being offered clothes when I already feel like a failure? It felt like I was being given a reminder of everything I didn't achieve." As those words sank in, I realized that my intentions, no matter how good, had missed the mark entirely. After our talk, a weight lifted, and I could see the flicker of understanding in her eyes. We hadn't solved anything major that day, but we were able to at least acknowledge the issues around our insecurities and how they intertwined with our friendship. I promised myself to be more careful moving forward, knowing that sometimes, a helping hand can accidentally feel like a shove. As I walked back to my desk, a thought struck me: maybe we can't fix everything, but we can be honest about our feelings. I hoped this wasn't the end for Jenna and me but instead the beginning of a more genuine connection. A few weeks later, while cleaning out my closet again, I thought of her. I held onto those clothes but not out of guilt or as a reminder of my past, but as a nod to the complicated yet beautiful ways our paths crossed, forever reminding me to tread more gently in such delicate situations. The thoughts of Jenna lingered in my mind like the lingering scent of fading perfume, the good kind, the kind that brings back warmth rather than sadness. I spent the next few weeks navigating the delicate balance of our workplace dynamic. Each time I caught a glimpse of her, I felt a tug in my chest. She was becoming more than just a coworker, she was a reminder of empathy and understanding, the raw connection that can emerge from vulnerability. I remember one afternoon, I noticed Jenna in the break room, her shoulders slumped slightly as she stirred her coffee, lost in thought. I hesitated at the entrance, unsure if I should join her or give her space. But something nudged me forward, a quiet urge to ask, so I did. "Hey, you okay?" I ventured, my voice softer than I intended, slightly tinged with concern. Jenna looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she managed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just tired, you know?" she replied, but I could see the walls still standing. Instead of prying, I settled into a nearby chair, and we exchanged small talk, laughing about mundane things, each joke momentarily peeling back layers of her guarded demeanor. It felt good, like we were slowly weaving a new tapestry of friendship, a new bond built on honesty rather than the remnants of misunderstanding. Then one evening, as I sat on my bed staring at the growing mountain of clothes I had set aside for donation, a sudden urge overcame me. Maybe, just maybe, I could offer some of them to Jenna. I gathered a few pieces that I thought would suit her style, things I had loved, but now felt like remnants of someone else's life. I imagined her face lighting up as she tried them on, the tentative joy mirrored in her appreciative smile. But the moment I sealed that bag, doubt snuck in like a cold breeze through an open window. What if she took it the wrong way? What if it reminded her of her own struggles with weight and self-acceptance? The very last thing I wanted was for her to feel any sense of embarrassment or inadequacy. Still, I made a decision. I wouldn't let fear steer me clear of taking a chance to show kindness. The next day at work, I approached her after a meeting, heart racing as I felt the weight of the garment bag in my hands. "Hey, Jenna, do you have a minute?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked curious but cautious, and as I revealed the bag, I could practically see the gears turning in her mind. "These are some clothes I thought you might like. If you want them, great, if not, that's perfectly okay, too." Her eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and uncertainty flashing across her face. I watched her expression closely, fearing I'd overstepped. To my relief, she took a small step forward, reaching out to touch the fabric. "Really? You'd part with these?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, and something about the vulnerability in her tone struck me. Here was someone who was beginning to peel back her own layers of insecurity, too. We spent a few moments going through the bag together. I noticed the way her nervous fingers grazed over the fabric, and I smiled when she found a favorite piece, an old cardigan I used to wear constantly. "This is really cute," she said, holding it up to her frame, and for the first time, I saw her smile genuinely, unfettered by her worries, and it felt like the sun breaking through clouds. Our conversation soon drifted to our shared experiences of battling our own reflections, and I could feel the barriers crumbling even further. She told me about her struggles with body image, and I found myself opening up about mine, an unexpected weight lifting as I articulated feelings I had kept bottled inside for years. But what surprised me most was the raw understanding that rippled between us, the way it felt like we were both navigating a path through the shadows of our past. When we parted that day, I had a flicker of hope in my chest, a small, glowing ember signaling that yes, maybe I hadn't messed things up completely with Jenna after all. Instead, perhaps we were finding something much stronger together, a connection that embraced our imperfections and uncertainties. A couple of weeks passed, and I noticed how our conversations deepened. Each friendly exchange, each shared laugh unfurled layers of kindness that illuminated our workdays. Eventually, I received a text from her late one evening, simple but profound. "Thank you for being so understanding, and for the clothes. Your kindness means more than you know." Reading those words, I felt a rush of warmth envelop me. This journey, still unfolding between us, had become something meaningful. Sometimes, I still catch myself reminiscing about Jenna and that moment in the break room, the moment that nudged me to embrace vulnerability and break down the walls we so often put up in our lives. Our paths intertwined beautifully, weaving a friendship rooted not just in shared experiences, but in the profound honesty of our journeys. I realized then that perhaps the greatest gift you can give someone isn't just your support, but also the chance to embrace their own story alongside yours. As for my closet, it remains a mixture of memories and reminders, each piece a testament to the bonds we form when we tread gently on the paths of others, opening ourselves to understanding and connection along the way. This newfound sense of understanding hung over me like a warm blanket, enriching my days at work. I felt lighter, not just from my physical transformation, but emotionally, too. Jenna and I launched into a friendship that surprised both of us. Lunchtime became a ritual of laughter and sharing secrets, the kind of bond that offers solace amidst the mundane. I even found myself looking forward to those small, fleeting moments, a shared joke, her eyes sparkling with mischief, or the way she'd roll her eyes but crack a smile when I made a goofy remark. That's what friendship can do. It nourishes you, fills the empty spaces in your heart that you didn't even know were there. But then came the day I noticed Jenna's mood shift. It was subtle at first, like a storm brewing in the distance. She would stare at her phone during lunch, her fingers curling and uncurling as if memorizing a dance routine she was suddenly unsure of. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach, that familiar twinge of empathy reminding me how little the surface can reveal. One afternoon, as we sat surrounded by the usual office chatter, I decided, no, I needed to broach the subject. Hey, what's going on? You've been a little off lately. I tried to sound casual, but even I could hear the concern lacing my voice. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face like the shadow of clouds passing by. It's nothing, she said, but her eyes told a different story. I sat still, not pressing but letting the silence wrap around us, allowing her to find her own words. She hesitated, glancing down at her untouched salad. I applied for a promotion and didn't get it. I thought I had a good chance. The vulnerability in her voice pierced through layers of practiced indifference. I remembered what it felt like to crave validation in a world that often seemed indifferent, a feeling we shared despite our stark differences. I'm really sorry to hear that, I said softly. I know how hard you worked for it. Just know that your talent and hard work don't go unnoticed. A small smile tugged at her lips, grateful yet fragile. As we exchanged words, the truth seeped in. Rejection had its own sting, one that could echo far beyond the workplace. Without really planning it, I felt myself bridging the gap that fear had created. You know, I still have those clothes I was telling you about. While they aren't a magic solution, I thought maybe you'd want to try them. They're just sitting there, I offered, hoping it wouldn't feel like pity. To my surprise, Jenna's brows furrowed, confusion coating her features. You sure that's okay? I mean, they were yours. Of course, I said, the conviction sweeping through me. It would mean a lot to see them put to good use. Besides, they're like a little part of our journey here, right? We stared at each other, a silent exchange deepening our connection even further. I saw her recognizing the hope within the gesture, the warmth of shared vulnerability transforming an old wound into something beautifully resonant. Later that week, I brought the clothes to her. When she opened the bag, eyes wide with surprise mingling with appreciation, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Each piece she tried on revealed not just fabric on skin, but also a layer of strength hidden beneath the seams of doubt. It was a miniature celebration, two friends standing tall in their stories, side by side. Jenna ended up wearing one of the old jackets the next week, my favorite one, paired with confidence that felt new yet familiar, a striking reflection of the growth we both were navigating. That day marked a turning point, not just in how we shared our journeys, but in understanding what it means to lean on each other, to give without losing a piece of yourself. Looking back now, reflecting on that chaotic but beautiful year with Jenna, I realize it's less about what we lose in life and more about what we find when we share. Each moment is a thread in the tapestry of relationships, connecting us in ways we can't always see. It has taught me that every experience, be it joyful or heartbreaking, carries the potential to interlace our lives in profound ways we can never fully understand. And as I gaze into my closet now, each piece still stands as a memory, a promise that there's always space for understanding and compassion, anchored firmly in the bond we chose to foster between us. When I first moved into my college dorm, I was filled with a mix of excitement and fear. Living away from home meant newfound freedom coupled with a whole lot of responsibility, but nothing quite prepared me for becoming a reluctant pet owner. My roommate, Jamie, had a long-haired tabby cat named Oliver, a fluffy bundle of mischief that seemed to have an uncanny ability to detect when I was vulnerable, and despite my initial hesitation toward sharing my space with an animal, I found that I could tolerate Oliver's antics, until that fateful Tuesday afternoon. It had been a long day filled with back-to-back classes and a looming assignment I was struggling to tackle. I returned to our dorm, a small space cluttered with books, clothes, and the ever-present scent of takeout. The moment I settled into my bed, ready to drown out the world with some music, I heard Jamie's voice carry through the thin walls as she chatted with friends. I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses, a stark contrast to the chaotic storm of thoughts whirling in my mind about deadlines and future plans. It wasn't long before Oliver, as if sensing my solitude, poked his head through the door, his wide yellow eyes fixed on me. Not now, Oliver, I murmured, hoping to ward him off with my exhaustion, but, as it turns out, nothing could deter his determination. He wiggled through the slightly ajar door and hopped onto my bed, his presence filling me with a mixture of annoyance and reluctant affection. I gently shoved him off, trying to reclaim the boundaries I had set around my personal space, but I couldn't help but chuckle as he stared up at me, his ears twitching with every sound in the room. Then came the moment that seized my attention and left me questioning my sanity. Oliver, in a burst of unexpected empathy, nuzzled his face against my hand, then proceeded to bat at my fingers as if to say, "I'm really sorry for intruding, see how cute I am?" I blinked in disbelief, half wondering if I had gone mad or if this was just a cleverly plotted scheme orchestrated by my roommate. "You really think a cat can apologize?" I thought, lowering my hand hesitantly. The warmth of his fur was oddly comforting. Yet that comforting feeling quickly twisted into discomfort as Jamie burst into my room, beaming with pride for her well-behaved cat. "Do you see him apologizing?" she joked, and I couldn't help but feel a tight knot of frustration building in my chest. I had set boundaries for a reason. I needed that space to unwind, to think, and to not feel like I was babysitting a creature who had no concept of personal space. "Maybe he's learned how to be more considerate," Jamie added, but the playful tone felt dismissive of my true predicament. The following day became a cycle of Oliver seeking me out, sitting on my desk as I tried to study, performing antics to win my affection, and despite my best efforts to keep him at bay, I found myself secretly charmed. However, a tipping point came when, the next day, he curled into my lap while I was engrossed in reading. I felt warmth radiating from him, and suddenly, it felt like Oliver had transformed into an emotional semaphore, signaling that I wasn't alone despite all the chaos around me. Just as soon as the joy of that connection blossomed, the reality of our living situation crashed into it. I realized that I wasn't just fighting against a cat, I was fighting against the inklings of companionship that came with it, the roots of connection that dug deep into my reserved heart that I had not anticipated. So when Oliver came to me yet again, his head bowing slightly as he gazed with those imploring eyes as if he understood my troubles, I took a breath and softly said, "You can come in, but only this once." In that moment, there was an undeniable shift, not just between me and Oliver, but within myself as well. It felt strangely cathartic to open my door, both literally and metaphorically, allowing this little creature to occupy not just my space but also my weary heart. As days turned into weeks, I found more peace in cohabiting with Jamie and Oliver than I could have ever imagined. I started sharing moments with Oliver where his purring soothed my anxieties, moments where Jamie and I would laugh as Oliver got himself tangled in random objects in the room, and before I knew it, our space felt less like a cold dormitory and more like home. My fears of losing control over my personal space diminished, and I learned to embrace the chaos that comes with companionship. In the end, I couldn't tell if I was the asshole for trying to maintain my boundaries or if I had simply been afraid of letting someone, or something, new into my life. Perhaps some apologies, whether from a person or a cat, don't need to be spoken at all. Update: a couple of months later, Jamie and I decided to adopt a second cat. In a way, it felt as if Oliver had guided me to accept that sometimes, it's okay to let in what makes us feel alive, especially when it comes in the form of warmth, purrs, and unexpected companionship. Reflecting back on that pivotal moment with Oliver still evokes a swirl of emotions within me. I sat on my bed, surrounded by familiar comforts, the soft glow of fairy lights illuminating the corners of my room, the gentle scent of lavender wafting through the air. Everything felt just as it had for weeks, a safe, predictable cocoon. After the strange encounter with Oliver, I had decided to uphold my boundaries, uncertain yet relieved at my resolve. But as the chill of fall drifted into winter, my heart began to soften, and I noticed the joyous familiarity of my life gradually morphing into something deeper. Jamie often shared stories, enthusiastic and filled with laughter, about Oliver's antics, how he would curiously poke around the fridge or chase after the sunlight that streamed through our windows each morning. I could feel the warmth in her voice, the way Oliver brought light into our shared space, and yet, I found myself struggling with the thought of letting go of my well-guarded solitude. Days turned into weeks, and while I maintained my distance from the cat, I also began to observe him quietly from a distance. His emerald eyes held a wisdom that I could sense, almost as if he understood my hesitation but remained unbothered by it. There was something almost enchanting about how he'd stretch languidly by the warmth of the radiator, echoing the simple tranquility I craved yet feared. Slowly, I began to warm to his presence, not so much in a grand gesture, but through those small, almost negligent interactions, like when I would stand in the kitchen and catch him watching me as if waiting for an invitation into my life. It surprised me how quickly I started to miss him during those moments I chose to withdraw into my room, loathing how I had created such a divide between us with my own fears. I found myself half-consciously leaving my door ajar at night, just to catch the rhythm of his soft padding outside, an unspoken invitation for him to join me should he so choose. Finally, when Jamie suggested we adopt a second cat, a rush of emotions flared within me: fear, excitement, and a surprising sense of relief. I realized then that perhaps my self-imposed barriers had been choking me much more than any intrusion of Oliver ever could. As Jamie collected supplies and eagerly researched rescue shelters, I felt a gentle nudge toward acceptance, the idea of companionship igniting something long dormant within me. When we first met our new feline friend, a timid little bundle of gray with striking blue eyes, it felt surreal in a way that made my heart race. As Jamie gently coaxed the shy kitten forward, I felt Oliver rub against my leg, almost as if he already understood his role in this new chapter. They seemed to know what it was like to be on the fringes of solitude. Maybe, just maybe, they had both offered me a chance to be part of their world, urging me to step outside the walls I had so carefully crafted. With time and patience, the two cats became inseparable companions, and in a way, they mirrored my own journey, growth born from vulnerability. They would sprawl across my lap as I began to read or watch TV, the tiny burbles of purrs resonating with a newfound symphony of warmth. I found joy in their elegance and mischief, how they filled the spaces I had once deliberately kept empty. A few evenings later, as we settled on the couch together, I glanced at Oliver, who nestled close beside my new kitten, and it struck me clear: they offered me not just companionship but a sense of belonging, a reassurance that life was meant to be shared, even with those who might initially feel foreign. Moving forward, I learned to trust my instincts, realizing that letting in love and connection also meant unearthing parts of myself I had neglected. The warmth of their presence became my nightly solace, and as I drifted off, I understood that sometimes, the greatest apologies are those we find in the simple act of letting go, of making space for what makes us feel alive, a realization I will carry with me long into the night. As we settled into our new routine with the two cats, Oliver and our new addition, Luna, I found a sense of peace creeping into my life that I hadn't anticipated. Initially, I worried that introducing another feline into our already chaotic household might upset the delicate balance we had achieved. But Luna, with her soft black fur and mischievous eyes that sparkled with playful curiosity, helped to soothe those fears. She immediately took to Oliver, who, despite his regal demeanor, slipped into the role of doting big brother almost instinctively. Watching them wrestle and chase one another around our small apartment filled me with a joy I had almost forgotten existed. Each evening, as I snuggled under my favorite blanket, I reveled in the sound of their joyful antics, the gentle thrum of purring united in a symphony of comfort that lulled me into tranquility. Luna, with her dynamic energy, brought an unexpected vibrancy to my once quiet nights. It felt like she had unlocked something within me, something that craved interaction, warmth, and connection. I began to share my thoughts and dreams aloud, sometimes to myself while I sat on the couch, the cats curled up beside me, and I realized it wasn't just a one-sided conversation. Their feline presence felt like a mirror reflecting my own growth. I found myself questioning what other parts of my life I had unknowingly restricted with self-imposed barriers, so I began allowing friends over more often, fostering deeper relationships and inviting them into the sanctuary I had created. Jamie noticed the change, too. We laughed more, shared quiet meals where silence felt comfortable rather than suffocating. It was as if Oliver and Luna were not simply pets but ambassadors of companionship, urging me to embrace vulnerability. The change wasn't always easy. There were moments when the weight of the world would push against my chest, reminding me of past moments when I had tucked myself away. A few months in, I had what I thought was an innocuous conversation with Jamie about my feelings. I shared how I had been reflecting on why I had initially refused Oliver's well-meant apology, recounting how I now understood that love sometimes requires us to open our doors, be they metaphorical or literal, to those we fear might disturb our carefully crafted solitude. Jamie nodded thoughtfully, offering me a smile that was understanding yet tinged with sadness, and in that moment, I recognized the strength within vulnerability. It was okay to feel afraid, it was okay to be uncertain. I realize now that receiving love, whether it's from a person or a furry companion, meant stepping into the unknown, but it is also where the most profound connections could blossom. The days became less about confrontation and more about connection. About sharing our lives openly rather than behind walls built from past hurts. Then came the night that brought everything together, a night that served as a reminder of the journey I had taken since Oliver's heartfelt apology. It was a brisk winter evening, and I settled down to enjoy a quiet night with a cup of tea. The world outside was painted in white, the street lamps casting a warm glow against the snow, while inside, my 2 cats curled contentedly on my legs. I flipped open my journal, a ritual I had embraced as I gathered my thoughts, documenting the emotional clarity that had graced my life in recent months. Suddenly, Oliver leapt from my lap onto the desk, his little paws tapping against the pages until he settled beside me, staring up with those piercing green eyes as if he were reading my mind. It struck me that there was a profound sense of gratitude swelling within me, gratitude not just for Oliver and Luna but for the whole journey that had brought me to this moment. I leaned down, giving Oliver a gentle scratch behind the ears, and said aloud, "Thank you for teaching me how to love again." When Luna nudged her head against my hand, insisting on her share of affection, I felt an overwhelming sense of connection, a comforting reminder that sometimes the most precious breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places. In the blend of their fuzzy warmth and the tranquil ambience of the room, I embraced the idea that letting go of boundaries could be liberating, not just for myself but for the new family we were building together. As I closed my journal and let the stillness envelop me, I understood that life thrives in shared warmth, and perhaps, the most genuine apologies come wrapped in the soft fur of those who teach us the value of presence, love, and belonging. I never imagined that a single night could unravel so much of my carefully constructed life, but there I was, standing in my dimly lit kitchen, stomach churning with panic as I replayed the events of the evening over and over in my mind. It all began as any ordinary Saturday. I was at home, enjoying a quiet evening after a grueling week at the office, feeling the weight of the world lift just a little as I prepared to indulge in my favorite comfort food, macaroni and cheese. I was halfway through boiling the pasta when I heard an urgent knock at my door. My heart raced. It was unusual for anyone to visit me unannounced, especially this late. When I opened the door, my neighbor, Sarah, stood there, her breathing heavy, face pale, and hair disheveled. She had always been the burst of energy on our otherwise quiet street, but tonight she looked like a ghost, trembling and wide-eyed. "We need to get inside, now," she whispered, pulling me into her apartment without waiting for a response. Before I could grasp the situation, her hand motioned to the window where I saw fear reflecting in her eyes as she explained something I could barely comprehend. She spoke of some chemical cloud that had emerged from the abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, claiming it was dangerous, potentially life-threatening. I could almost feel the air grow denser around us, but I was skeptical. It seemed bizarre and conjured images of a poorly written horror flick. Yet, the urgency in her voice cracked through my layers of disbelief, and I could see she was genuinely frightened. It wasn't long before the acrid smell wafted in through the window, causing immediate dread to claw at my chest. I had learned a little about chemistry in college. I knew enough to also understand that some poisons can fester without notice. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach as I shut the window and joined her on the couch, trying to piece together what we should do. As time passed in silence, the tension rapidly escalated. Outside, the muted chaos of sirens wailed in the distance, mingling with Sarah's quiet whimpers. I could tell she was spiraling. Despite my best efforts to reassure her, her breathing quickened, and soon I felt it too. The anxiety swirling in the room felt palpable. I propped up my phone on the coffee table, searching for updates or guidance from local news, anything to anchor us in reality, but then my fingers hesitated over a pop-up ad flashing on the screen. It was a promotional video for a new detoxification product that claimed to counteract chemical exposure. It was ridiculous of me to even consider it, but desperation does strange things to rational thought, and before long I had taken a deep breath and waded further into that dark abyss of misjudgment. "Let's try it," I suggested, wrestling through the lump in my throat. Sarah stared at me, her eyes wide and glossy, and for a moment, I thought she would refuse, but then that fear flickered, and with it, a look of agreement washed over her face. We knew it could be a scam, we knew that it could be even worse than doing nothing, but there we were, both of us grasping for anything that offered hope. We mixed the strange powder into water, the eerie fluorescent green swirling into a murky blend. With shaking hands, we divided the concoction between us and downed it, the taste nearly bile-like, and much to my horror, I could feel a knot of guilt twisting inside me. Soon after we drank it, reality blurred against the rising terror of what we'd done, along with what was happening outside in our town. Perhaps I should have called someone, or maybe we could have just stayed indoors, but that ill-fated choice only paved the way for more panic. The minutes dragged on, and suddenly Sarah bolted for the bathroom, retching and wailing in horror. My heart pounded violently against my ribcage. I watched her in a disoriented state, confused about whether I should comfort her or be terrified of what the potion had done. She came back, crumpled on the floor, flushed and sweaty, and I could see the blame settling between us, thick like poison itself. I wanted to scream at her for suggesting it, She wanted to scream at me for going along with it. The reality of what we had done set like cold cement in my stomach, the dread consuming every ounce of rational thought. Nothing felt right anymore, and in that moment of chaos, I lost control. In an outburst fueled by fear, I vented what I really thought about her and the mess we had just dived into. My words came out like daggers, slicing through the air, and as soon as they left my lips, I regretted them. "This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't come over looking for help," I shouted, horrified by the vitriol I directed at someone who, moments ago, I would have called my friend. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, the weight of my accusation smashing into her thin frame, and for a moment, I felt the world still around us. I hated how quickly I had attacked her, and yet I couldn't untangle the worry that had transformed into resentment so quickly, nor could I undo the hurt that painted her face. As the panic surged around us, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that the potion and the night's chaos were somehow intertwined, leaving everything spiraling beyond our control. I reached down to apologize, to reclaim the fragile bond we had before this all began, but the doorbell rang, and before I could react, Sarah fled to answer it, her fear conflating with urgency. I stood alone in the swirling mix of regret and anxiety, unable to voice the torment that pressed down on me as I listened to the voice of a paramedic outside, growing concerned about our unfamiliar reaction. I found solace in the idea of absolution, the hope that admitting what had happened would mend the frayed seams of the night. Ultimately, the shadows of my panic, my loud accusations, and the desperate measures we took wrapped around me like a heavy fog. Now, as I stand, looking at the aftermath of my words echoing into the late-night stillness, I know I must confront what I did, hoping that my confessions could provide some insight into the fragile line we walk when fear bleeds into blame. No update for now, this is where I leave it, a story unraveled but not finished. As I stood there, bathed in the muted glow of the streetlights, the last remnants of the panic-induced adrenaline began to fade from my body, leaving behind a dull ache in my chest. I could still hear Anna's voice piercing through the chaos, the way she cried for help and how the tension in the air tightened around us like a noose. It was a knife's edge we danced upon, teetering between vulnerability and paranoia. The events had spiraled so quickly, it felt surreal, like a fever dream I couldn't wake up from. Moments before the sirens had shared their chilling song with us, it was just another Friday night, a few drinks after work, laughter echoing through our modest apartment as Anna and I sat on our worn-out couch, sharing embarrassing stories from our years together. Things turned sinister fast, though, when a strange smell wafted in from our open window, smoky and acrid, an odor so sharp it felt like it belonged to another world. Before we could even piece together what was happening, dizziness hit me, and I saw Anna slump to the side, grasping her throat, her eyes wide in alarm. Panic surged through me in a torrent, my mind racing with a single mantra: save her. My world shifted as I flailed under the weight of responsibility. I bolted outside, desperately calling for help, though the words felt caught in my throat, tangled in knots of fear. Neighbors emerged, concerned and confused, but as I waved my arms in frantic gestures, I saw their faces twist with suspicion and fear. I could feel it, the judgment laying itself across my shoulders like a mantle I hadn't asked for. In my desperation, I grabbed the nearest object, anything to emphasize the urgency of the situation, and clutched a garden spade, wielding it like a knight's sword. My tone shifted as I pointed it at a group of bystanders, accusing them of negligence, of failing to see what was unfolding, the potential catastrophe waiting to bloom before our eyes. The spade, a symbol of my misplaced fury, had become an instrument of chaos rather than salvation. I could hear Anna yelling my name, her voice a distant sound that strained to break through the fog of hysteria. In that moment of sheer panic and misplaced aggression, I had become the very thing I was trying to combat. How could I have lost myself like that? The guilt crashed over me like waves, drowning my sense of reason. Eventually, shouting sirens jolted everyone, and professionals swarmed the scene, taking control, but they had seen me, frantic and armed, the chaotic shadow of fear painted across my face. As they worked on Anna, my accusations lingered in the air like the remnants of that foul chemical that had thrown us into turmoil. I had turned from her protector to her accuser, my hands shaking not from the aftermath of the substance but from the realization of my brutality. We spent hours at the hospital, Anna recovering under the watchful eyes of medical staff. I sat in the waiting room, anxiously glancing at the clock, each tick mocking my inability to fix what I wrecked with mere words. I had to face her, face what I had done, confront the demons I had unleashed in my panic. When they finally summoned me into her room, I took a shaky breath, feeling unbearably small. Anna lay there, looking so fragile amid the hospital blankets, her face drawn but eyes still holding a flicker of defiance. I stumbled through an inadequate apology, each word seemed insipid compared to the reality of the night. "I didn't mean for it to get that way," was all I could muster, fighting back the tears that stung my eyes. She just looked at me for a moment that felt like eternity, then asked the question that ripped through my heart: "Why did you turn on me?" A question so piercing, I felt it carve itself into the very center of my being. I could have broken down right there. I could have explained how fear reshaped my mind, how the layers of security I felt crumbled when I saw her in distress, the confusion of not knowing if I could trust what my senses told me. But standing there, faced with the raw truth of my actions, I couldn't speak. Instead, I leaned forward, placing my head in my hands, my breath hitching with the weight of remorse I had been carrying. Seconds stretched into minutes, until I felt her hand on my back, a gentle reminder that despite everything, we were still together. The silence that followed held its own weight, both an apology and a question, an invitation to understand that sometimes the worst damage comes not from the hands that inflict harm but from the panic born from fear of losing someone you love. As we both sat in that fragile silence, we started to piece together our broken night. Anna shared her own fright, revealing how isolation and the feeling of abandonment in that chaotic moment tightened around her, just as my accusations had. Our hearts cracked open in the tender glow of understanding. There were shared fears and vulnerabilities that had twisted our perception that night, grief and paranoia woven into our bond. It was a moment of raw honesty, one that would not erase my actions but could potentially stitch up the wounds festering between us. We held on to that realization, fragile as it was, knowing that the shadows of our panic would remain part of our story, a brush with darkness that would ultimately guide us both closer to light. And now, standing outside in that stillness, I realize that the confession isn't about demonizing myself but about embracing the imperfections of love and fear. Admitting that we are both searching for absolution, not from the mistakes we make, but from the understanding that sometimes the horror lies in how we react when the ground beneath us gives way. Life, with all its fear and uncertainty, can bind us more tightly than we anticipate, leaving imprints we prefer to mask. But here, with my confession, I choose to confront rather than deny, sharing our tale as an unfinished thread, evidence of resilience in the heart of human frailty. I can't rewind the night, nor can I return the sharp edges of my accusations. Instead, I hope that in sharing this tale, we can both learn to navigate that fragile line between fear and love, tangled yet unbreakable, moving forward toward understanding one breath at a time. As I sit in the stillness of my dimly lit room, the hum of the street outside a distant reminder of life continuing in its usual course, I find myself drawn back to the events that transpired just hours ago, the night that transformed into a chaotic whirlwind of emotions fueled by panic and chemical memories. It all began innocuously enough, just another evening spent at home with Amy, my partner of 4 years, sharing our latest find on Netflix, laughter punctuating the cozy atmosphere, a glass of wine in each of our hands as the day's stresses seemed to dissipate into the flickering glow of the television screen. But then, around 10 o'clock, amid bites of popcorn and lighthearted banter, there was a strange knock at the door that shattered our bubble. I paused, my heart quickening. Something in that abrupt sound felt off, a sharp note that sent a cold shiver down my spine. Amy had exchanged a glance with me, one that I had now come to identify as the look of instinctual dread, her brow furrowed as she paused the show. We were both rooted in that moment, unspoken fears hanging in the air like static electricity. Who could that be at this hour? She whispered, her voice barely above a murmur, as I, against my better judgment, approached the door, hoping it was just a friendly neighbor or a late-night delivery. Instead, when I opened it, everything changed. A group of men, their faces half shrouded in hooded sweatshirts, stood there, eyes glistening with determination and perhaps something more sinister. Before I could fully process the situation, a sharp smell invaded my senses, something acrid and metallic, causing my throat to tighten as I started to choke. The next moments were a blur, shots of adrenaline blinding me as they shoved a canister into our home, releasing a thick mist that quickly enveloped the hallway, hanging heavily like a shroud between us and freedom. I felt dread creeping up my spine as I stumbled backward, and instinct took over. The first thought that flashed through my mind was to protect Amy at all costs. My heart raced, my breath came in frantic bursts, and while logic urged me to seek caution, panic swelled within me, drowning out my rationality. In the chaos, I rallied my thoughts to grab her hand, but the contorted expressions on the intruders' faces, hints of laughter that cut through my fear, ignited something darker within me. "Get out. We don't have anything for you," I screamed, words spilling out in a harsh, defensive growl that I barely recognized. I shoved a nearby plant pot toward them, a final desperate gesture, but as Amy screamed in disbelief, I could sense my own failure to protect her tearing at the edges of my sanity. In the haze of panic, I accused her in my heightened state, a horrible confession slipping from my lips that she should have done something, anything more to prepare us for an attack like this. As those words left me, I saw the hurt collect in her eyes, the reflection of my fears etching deeper scars into our bond. There, amidst the swirling chaos, I had not only welcomed danger but had turned on the one person I loved most in the world. The intruders fled soon after, seemingly sensing our vulnerability and choosing not to engage further, shadows moving quickly in the dark. The reality of the empty air left behind hit me with the force of a tidal wave. We were standing in our own safe space, a sanctuary that had violated what we believed to be true. I sank to my knees, the weight of my anger, confusion, and unbridled fear crashing hard against my chest. "I am so sorry," I breathed, my voice hoarse, but the words felt inadequate, nothing compared to the guilt that now lingered in the silence. I could see Amy standing there, framed in the low light, a silhouette of shock, fragile, trembling, as she drew away from me physically and emotionally, a chasm opening between us. I watched her retreat, each step marked not just by her physical distance but by the raw heartache that lay heavy between us, growing wider with each passing moment. It would be hours until we could delve into the ramifications of the night, but even in our attempts to regain some semblance of normalcy, I could hear the echoes of my accusations, the betrayal of fear twisting a bond forged through trust. When morning came, the sunlight crept through the curtains, bathing everything in a harsh reality I wished to escape. But I knew, in confronting the pain and uncertainty, we had the chance to rebuild. I lay in the silence beside her, each breath filled with an unbearable weight of regret and longing for reconciliation. I yearned to convey the agonizing truth that I had acted out of sheer terror, that in the throes of panic, I had shattered her sense of safety instead of protecting it. The road to healing would be fraught with difficult conversations, but from this raw wound, I hoped we could come to understand each other in ways we had not dared before. I finally nudged closer, seeking her warmth, craving forgiveness and connection because while fear may have tried to sever us, love held a capacity to mend, even the most fractured of hearts. Sharing this story doesn't erase the actions of last night, nor does it unravel the fateful words that spilled unbidden from my lips, but I hope that in opening this dialogue, we can better navigate our experiences together. As the sun cast our silhouettes against the wall, an unfinished painting, my heart swelled with cautious hope, the understanding that trust can be torn and frayed yet can come back together stronger, each thread weaving into the greater tapestry of our love. Walking that thin line between fear and love may forever be our journey, but perhaps, just perhaps, we would emerge more resilient together, each confession a path to healing, each misstep a step toward newfound understanding, intertwining as we move forward, one breath at a time. Hiding my expensive shampoo and conditioner from my friend's guest wasn't a decision I took lightly, but as I stood in my small, dimly lit bathroom, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination swirling in my chest. I worked hard to earn the little luxuries in my life, especially my indulgent hair products that had become something of a personal ritual. To call them expensive seemed an understatement. They were a splurge, a treat for myself after months of saving and budgeting. My bathroom had always felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could retreat from the chaos of the outside world. I kept it meticulously organized, arranging everything on its shelves with care. But recently, a shadow had crossed the threshold of my sanctuary, Jess, my impulsive yet adventurous friend who had just moved into her new apartment. She invited me over often, and I loved spending time in her vibrant, chaotic space. However, Jess had this adorable but reckless knack for inviting people to stay over without asking, and her latest guest, Tara, seemed to embody all of Jess's wildest impulses. The first time Tara crashed at Jess's place, I was surprised at how quickly the two hit it off. Tara was a friend of a friend, someone I hadn't known well but instantly sensed was not particularly mindful of personal boundaries, especially when it came to possessions that didn't belong to her. When I learned she was staying for a few weeks, I started to feel uneasy, especially about my beloved shampoo and conditioner that I'd proudly displayed on my bathroom shelf. My routine had always included a lavish wash and condition cycle that lulled me into a sense of peace. I dreaded the idea of Tara, with her carelessness, pouring things out like they were a bottle of cheap soda. I couldn't help but imagine the horror of her washing her hair with my expensive products, treating them like mere souvenirs from the drugstore. Gradually, the creeping anxiety prompted me to act. One night, armed with the notion that this was, quite simply, my hair ritual we were talking about, I tucked both bottles away in the back corner of my closet, swaddled in soft towels, the equivalent of a security blanket. It felt a bit ridiculous, but as I tucked the last towel around them, a sense of relief washed over me like a soothing balm. I convinced myself this wasn't about being selfish, it was about protecting a cherished part of my routine. Yet, the first morning after doing so, a wave of guilt crashed over me. I knew Jess would find it odd if Tara expressed interest in trying to use my products and got no response. That guilt clung to me through breakfast, settling deep in my stomach as Jess happened to mention Tara's curiosity about my shower setup. A part of me wanted to say, "Oh, I hid my shampoo," but I never found the words. Instead, I casually brushed it off, hoping Jess would do the same. That evening, as I basked in my freshly cleaned hair, I overheard Jess telling Tara about my shampoo and conditioner. I felt my heart speed up. I knew she could have easily sought them out. The sheer panic coursing through me was further amplified when I overheard Tara excitedly asking if she could use them. Oh no, I thought, my heart sinking. My mind raced at the thought of my precious products being neglected, warped into a messy heap of potentially sticky hair. I knew I needed to keep them safe, to preserve my little corner of joy, but part of me felt like a villain for shutting my friend out from sharing in that joy. Weeks passed. I never let Tara close enough to my bathroom to even know what awaited her behind that perfectly organized door. Jess noticed my retreat into the bathroom, the strange avoidance of discussing products, and the unspoken tension grew. One afternoon, the gentle rain tapped on the window as we lounged on the couch, and Jess innocently broke the silence. "Why don't you like Tara?" After a long silence, I finally admitted the truth. I could feel my voice vibrating with anxiety as I explained everything, my fear, the guilty pleasure of my routine, and how I wanted to protect it from something outside of my control. Jess listened, her expression thoughtful. "It's okay to worry about your things, but you could have trusted me or Tara with it." I hadn't thought of it that way. It was a wake-up call, and even though I felt a weight lift off my chest, I still worried about how to turn around this small mountain of tension. That evening, I decided to take a step toward resolution. I apologized to Jess for hiding my shampoo and asked her to invite Tara to my place and share my routine with her. That night, I found myself pouring the leftover conditioner effortlessly into 2 fun little travel bottles, each adorned with tags from the local craft store. I felt a little silly but undeniably excited. As Jess and Tara cooed over the softness of my hair and products that now graced Tara's curls too, my heart swelled with an unexpected warmth. In that moment, the worry faded and revealed a simple truth: sometimes, sharing your treasures can create a bond far deeper than anything you could have imagined. I learned that night the importance of trust, and the joy that can spring from letting someone in. In time, Tara began to understand the reason behind my initial hesitation and even sought out her own version of expensive hair care, which made us laugh. It turned out the deeper conflict wasn't me being protective of my possessions but rather the challenge of allowing kindness and vulnerability to thrive in the face of anxiety. Update: a few months later, as we were all sprawled in Jess's living room post-movie, Tara casually remarked about how my products had been a game-changer for her hair. A shared celebration emerged from that little mention, and in the light of her compliment, I realized my shampoo and conditioner had become a bridge rather than a barrier, strengthening the bond of friendship we had forged together. Just like that. The little pieces of my past no longer felt like possessions to guard, but instead reminders of how precious connections can be when fears are set aside. As the afternoon sun filtered through the sheer curtains of Jess's living room, casting gentle patterns on the floor, I found myself wrapped in a comfort I hadn't anticipated. The remnants of popcorn littered the coffee table, and the warm laughter of my friends mingled with the last fading echoes of the movie we had just finished watching. Jess, ever the host, had arranged an impressive spread of snacks, and the sweet familiarity in the air was both soothing and invigorating. Tara's passing comment about my luxurious shampoo and conditioner stirred something profound within me. I had always viewed my hair products as artifacts of exclusivity, treasures to be safeguarded like fragile relics from a past that felt so foreign now. I'd held so tightly to my fears about sharing them, fears that stemmed from memories of being laughed at for my tastes, or feeling out of place when unable to relate to the more frugal habits of others. Yet, sitting there, watching the joy spread across Tara's face as she spoke about how my products had transformed her hair, I realized that I had unwittingly constructed unnecessary walls around my treasures. Each game changer she recounted served as a testament to the bonds we were building, not just over hair care but over shared experiences and vulnerabilities. The tension in my chest, which once tightened at the thought of my belongings being under someone else's unappreciative gaze, began to dissolve like ice on a warm day. As the conversation flowed and we made plans for our next movie night, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. I was gradually learning that sharing a part of myself didn't deplete my identity. Instead, it enriched the connection we had cultivated. It inspired me to reflect on my resistance to letting others in. I had spent so long afraid that my belongings might define me in ways I didn't want, when in actuality, they had become a thread in the fabric of our friendship, just like the conversations we shared about dreams, ambitions, and insecurities. In the weeks that followed, I began not only to share my shampoo and conditioner with Tara but also to be more open about my other passions. One evening, while we were sitting on the porch, I showed her my collection of rare vinyl records, each with a story behind it. Tara listened intently, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, and soon we were immersed in discussions about music that led us to swap recommendations and have deep conversations about the feelings that different albums evoked in us. I began to see my unique preferences, whether in hair care or music, as invitations rather than barriers, inviting connections where I might have otherwise been guarded. As these connections blossomed, it became clear that my journey was no longer just about overcoming anxiety, it had transformed into a celebration of shared experiences. My friends often joked about being product prescribers, each confidently recommending their go-to beauty secrets or stylistic tips, and with every laugh and playful criticism, I felt more at home. We even joked about hosting a hair care night where we'd explore different styles while trading our favorite products. It inspired me to create a cozy, safe space where everyone could come together, no longer just around possessions but around an openness to learn and share. Looking back, I realized that my initial instinct to hide my shampoo and conditioner had stemmed from a fear of vulnerability, yet here I was, a few months later, celebrating connections that had formed not in spite of my unique identity but because of it. I had found a community that cherished each other's quirks, welcoming all that made us who we are. This realization settled in my heart like a warm glow, reminding me that sometimes, the things we fear most about sharing are the very things that unlock a deeper understanding within our relationships. So, when Tara reminisced about that fateful day in Jess's living room, it wasn't just a compliment, it was that shared bridge, a memory that would always remind me of the importance of opening my heart and allowing friendship to weave its way into the fabric of my life. And as we all gathered again for those cozy movie nights, my heart swelled with gratitude, for I had learned that the most precious possessions of all are the bonds we cultivate and cherish with those we hold dear. Our evenings together soon became a ritual, a sanctuary filled with laughter, old movies, and the steady ebb and flow of conversation that deepened our friendships. Tara, with her infectious enthusiasm, often took the lead, introducing us to the latest comedies or nostalgic flicks from the 90s. Each time we settled in on the couch, popcorn in hand, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since I first met them. The little insecurities I had once clung to, my fear of losing my prized hair products or the jealousy I felt when Tara first used them, had transformed into a comfort, a reminder that vulnerability could be the cornerstone of connection. There was something about seeing Tara effortlessly toss her hair over her shoulder, the glossy shine catching the light like a beautifully woven thread connecting us all. One evening, after binge-watching a series, the topic shifted to future plans, dreams and aspirations, the kind that often linger in the quiet corners of our minds. Tara spoke of her ambition to start a blog about beauty and self-care, a project that had been simmering just beneath the surface. As she spoke, I felt a bubbling sense of pride for her, tinged with a familiar pull of envy. It seemed so effortless for her, proclaiming her passion to the world, while I'd always been apprehensive about sharing my own nuances with others. It was then that I remembered the first day she had borrowed my shampoo, the piano line of laughter spilling from her lips when I first revealed my stash, the way she had touched each bottle with reverence, as if holding a gem. After a thoughtful pause, I decided to share, a leap of faith that surprised even me. I opened up about my trepidation towards vulnerability and how I had kept my products hidden, all of it transforming into an opportunity to encourage her ambition. Tara listened, her expression shifting from curiosity to understanding, and as she did, Jess chimed in, sharing her own struggles with self-doubt. There was a flicker of realization in the air, an unspoken bond that connected the three of us through shared fears and expectations. For that brief moment, it felt as if I was peeling back the layers of a protective shell, bearing parts of myself that had long been closed off. As our conversation became more heartfelt, laughter mingling with a shared sense of vulnerability, I felt the weight of my earlier insecurities lift. It was a relief to acknowledge that we all had our ups and downs, insecurities and aspirations alike, and our friendship had become a safe space where we could lay it all bare. On that night, we forged a pact to not only support each other in achieving our dreams but also to celebrate our failures as part of this imperfect, beautiful tapestry we were weaving together. Weeks rolled into months, and soon Tara launched her blog, drawing from every laugh, every tear, and every awkward moment we had shared as friends. I watched her thrive, and with each updated post she published, I felt a part of that journey. She was my friend, and in her success, I celebrated my own triumph over my fears. That bond we formed wasn't just about my shampoo, it was a reflection of understanding, trust, and the beautiful messiness of life. In the quiet hours of the night, as I lay beneath the comforting weight of my blankets, I often found myself smiling, recalling the beginning of this incredible journey. The threads woven through friendship had become the very fabric of my existence, reminding me that every data point of insecurity dissolved in the glow of genuine connections. The profound lesson I learned, encased in the simplicity of shared moments over popcorn and laughter, was that authenticity in relationships can turn even our smallest concerns into a celebration of vulnerability, crafting a life that's rich not in possessions, but deep in love and understanding. And every time I reached for my bottles of shampoo and conditioner, I smiled, knowing they now served not just a personal ritual, but a reminder of the friendships I cherished and the bridges we had built together. For as long as I can remember, my parents have always been strict when it comes to what I read. They believe in shielding me from the dark side of literature, books they deemed inappropriate or dangerous, which often encompassed anything that challenged the status quo or stirred my imagination too vividly. This led to an interesting internal conflict for me. While I was desperate to escape into worlds full of adventure, mystery, and, yes, even the darkness they so feared, I felt trapped under their watchful eyes. It all began one chilly autumn afternoon when I stumbled upon an old box in the attic while searching for my winter clothes. Inside were worn-out paperbacks, the covers faded and spines cracked, titles that made my heart race with excitement just reading them. 1984. Fahrenheit 451, and even the perks of being a wallflower. I couldn't believe my luck. I rifled through the pages, inhaling the musty scent of forgotten stories, my mind racing with ideas of how I could read them undetected. So I devised a plan. I would lie about volunteering times at the local community center, creating a facade of altruism while I secretly lost myself in the pages of these banned books, snatching moments at home whenever I could, hidden in the dim light of my room, thoroughly engrossed in worlds that dared to challenge the ordinary. The thrill of reading each book was amplified by the tension of nearly being discovered. I can still feel the anxiety my heart would drum up as I heard my parents' footsteps approaching my room, the panic of tossing the book beneath my bed or pretending to be occupied with homework. Every day brought a renewed sense of rebellion, and though I felt guilty for lying, the joys of reading and the new perspectives I gained were intoxicating, filling parts of my soul that had felt stifled under my parents' protective grip. However, as the months went on, my deception began to weigh heavily on me, gnawing at my conscience like an unwelcome stranger. The guilt was persistent, a dark shadow that stretched longer with each borrowed moment spent in those fictional realms while my reality lay neglected. It felt like I was double living. One life as the dutiful daughter and another as a voracious reader devouring forbidden fruit. I found myself drawn into the narratives to escape the guilt, grappling with complex characters and moral dilemmas that had me questioning the very lines between right and wrong. The stories opened my eyes wider, forcing me to confront my own beliefs, and with each page turned, I realized more about myself than I had ever anticipated. Finally, the inevitable day came. I returned home earlier than usual from my volunteering, boisterous laughter echoing in the hallway as I overheard my parents discussing a recent scandal involving a local family, something that triggered my instinct to flee, the kind of wild and uncontrollable urge to hide, to keep my secrets tucked away from prying eyes. As I entered my room, barely able to breathe, I found myself staring at the open books piled on my desk, the pages fluttering in the gentle breeze from the cracked window. In that moment of reckoning, I found clarity. It wasn't just the thrill of the stories but what they taught me about facing truths. I had built this elaborate tapestry of lies, and it felt utterly exhausting. That night, after tossing and turning, I gathered the courage to write my parents a letter, something raw and heartfelt, confessing everything, the lies, the books, my need for understanding, and my thirst for knowledge. I left the letter on the kitchen table and went to bed, feeling strangely light, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. When I woke up the next morning, my parents were waiting, and my heart raced, not with fear but hope. What followed was a lengthy conversation filled with unexpected discoveries. My parents shared their own fears about the world, how they wanted to protect me from the confusion and chaos that could come from confronting uncomfortable truths too soon. In the end, I found out that they were more open than I had ever imagined, their love for me woven tightly with their fears, and together, we discussed what I had read. I had anticipated rejection, but instead, I found a middle ground, a new agreement where we could explore literature together, perhaps even tackling some of those challenging books as a family. Looking back, it wasn't only about the thrill of defiance, it was about forging deeper connections through honesty. Now, about 6 months later, the shadows of guilt have dimmed, replaced by a deeper understanding between my parents and me, an understanding that has allowed me to step into the world of literature freely, knowing that while the stories may challenge us, they also connect us in the most profound ways. My mom even recommended a few books of her own, and I often find us discussing the very themes that used to frighten me. Sometimes I wonder, if I had never lied, would we have ever reached this point of openness? The irony of my confession becoming a bridge instead of a chasm still lingers, a perfect reminder that sometimes honesty is the doorway to liberation. And as the weeks rolled on, I found myself embracing not just the books I had once furtively devoured, but also a genuine relationship with my parents that had blossomed from my initial deception. The irony persisted like a quiet echo in my mind. What had begun as a mere act of rebellion had paved the way for understanding, empathy, and connection. Our late-night discussions started to feel more like exchanges between equals instead of the monologues I once dreaded. For the first time, I could speak freely, my tentative words met with thoughtful consideration rather than dismissiveness. My mom, whose narrow view of the world had previously felt like a cage, revealed layers I had never seen. She spoke of her own teenage years of confusion and rebellion, of the tightly bound expectations surrounding her, of books she had longed to read but felt were never provided for her. It was a two-way street, paved with vulnerability and mutual respect, and I often imagine that many parents in the world might also find themselves carrying unexamined fears and baggage that color their judgments. My father surprised me when, during one of those evenings, he pulled out a well-worn copy of 1984 from a shelf, a silent testament to his own teenage curiosity. He read passages aloud, his voice rising and falling like a gentle wave, and I sat transfixed, watching as he began to articulate thoughts he had held back for years. The stories we shared soon morphed into discussions about freedom, censorship, and the ways in which the world often seeks to bind us with invisible chains. They were discussions that blurred the lines between parent and child, inviting me to express my own thoughts about why the narratives of the past were as relevant today as they had ever been. As these conversations expanded our world, I noticed subtle shifts in my parents' demeanor. The tension that often filled the air, the silent judgments exchanged during dinner, began to dissipate, replaced by questions that probed deeper than just homework or weekend plans. I revealed, in time, my hidden treasure trove of other books, banned or otherwise, in a hesitant effort, expecting disbelief or reprimand. Yet their only response was curiosity, a desire to understand why I was drawn to those particular narratives. My parents eventually suggested we read one of my secret titles together, creating a new family tradition around literature. I chose The Catcher in the Rye, a coming-of-age saga that had once tempted me to stretch my own boundaries. The first time we sat down to read it together, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement, fully aware that we were traversing territory once deemed taboo, and I held my breath, anticipating any possible ripples of discomfort. Oddly enough, all those frayed edges yielded softness. My father's laughter during Holden's quirks and my mother sitting quietly through the emotional turmoil was strangely comforting. With every shared passage, every discerning glance or nod in agreement, I sensed the walls between us continuing to dissolve further, brick by brick. It became clear that for all the hidden chapters of our lives, honesty had acted as the ink that penned a renewed narrative for our family. Relaying my experiences became a healing process, not just for me, but for them, too. It was as if we had embarked on a literary quest together, confronting harsh truths, handling abrasive characters, and making sense of complex emotions that each book evoked. The old fears I had felt about them severing ties if I confessed turned into rays of understanding, defying any expectation. It was hard to believe I once feared their judgment. These moments of connection had become both a refuge and a revelation. We initiated a new phase in our family life centered on exploration and acceptance, each book we read together leading us to deeper conversations that demanded both vulnerability and courage. Through our shared experiences, we began to explore the world outside our home, conversing about its many wonders long after the books were closed. Months later, during a warm autumn evening, as we wrapped ourselves in cozy blankets on the porch, my heart swelled with gratitude. We shared our latest reads, each story a testament to the struggles and strengths of human experience, and the laughter that enveloped us felt as natural as the rustling leaves around us. When the conversation culminated in my unique tale of deception, I chuckled, recalling how artfully I had woven my narrative of lies. I remarked, only half jokingly, how ironic it was that this all turned out for the best. My mom chuckled softly, a knowing smile dancing on her lips. Isn't it funny, she mused, how a little lie can lead to something so honest. In that moment, as we exchanged gentle glances full of unspoken understandings, I fully grasped the power of stories, not merely as vessels of adventure or lessons learned, but as bridges built, connecting us in our humanity. For now, honesty had become our family's new currency, one that brought us closer than I ever could have imagined, and I fell asleep that night with the warmth of 1,000 shared tales cradling me, a soothing reminder of how beautifully complex and connected our lives had become. For a while, everything felt perfect, a harmonious balance in our family life nurtured through dialogue and literature. But then a curious thing happened that unfurled the next chapter of this journey. One late evening, rummaging through the attic for forgotten treasures, I unearthed an old box of my childhood belongings. Inside, I found remnants of an earlier life, old drawings, fading notes from friends, and buried amidst them, a diary I had kept for a year during my most rebellious phase. The pages brimmed with unfiltered thoughts, confessions of secret readings and deep fears about my parents' approval. Feeling a blend of nostalgia and unease, I realized that the words captured the essence of my past dilemma. They chronicled the very thoughts that had driven me to the lies. I considered sharing it with my parents. After all, the thoughts had initially shaped my deceit. But fear momentarily gripped me, a faint shadow of my earlier self-research. Would dragging those old fears back into the light disrupt the harmony we had built? After days of contemplation, I summoned the courage to share the diary with my parents. Sitting down at the dinner table, I felt the weight of history in the room, a convergence of past and present that felt very much alive. I passed the diary to my mom, my fingers trembling slightly at the thought of her reading the truths I'd buried. As she opened the first page, memories flooded back. She read quietly, her brow furrowed in both understanding and concern. I watched as she turned each page, witnessing how a simple diary could weave together those early insecurities and another layer of connection. She finally closed it with a gentle sigh, glancing at my father, who appeared equally reflective. You know, my father spoke, breaking the silence, this was a part of you we never got to see. I can't say I understand all of it, but I do now see how much you struggled. Thank you for sharing it with us. And in that moment of quiet acceptance, I understood that honesty, in all its forms, whether born from rebellion or vulnerability, took courage, but it also laid the foundation for deeper understanding. The past need not lie dormant in dusty boxes, but rather could be embraced as a means of connection and growth. Despite the initial uncertainty of sharing my old fears, I left the table feeling lighter, our family bond stronger than ever before. We had created a new chapter, built not solely on the foundation of literature, but also crafted from our shared experiences and vulnerabilities. Each story, whether fictional or a fragment of my truth, became a testament to our journey, endless, evolving, filled with laughter, love, and the deeper insights that accompany growing together. As I settled into bed that night, cradling the precious diary close, I drifted off to sleep with a serene heart, attuned to the quiet yet powerful echoes of connection that continued to resonate through our lives. The next morning brought with it the gentle warmth of sunlight filtering through the curtains, casting soft shadows on the walls like a whispered promise of new beginnings. I awoke with a sense of peace that felt almost surreal. The weight of my secret had been lifted, replaced by an openness I had never before believed could exist in my family. As I padded down the hallway, thoughts fluttered like the pages of my books, bubbling with excitement about the conversations that awaited me. The kitchen was alive with the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of my dad's humming, a melody that had always signified comfort. My mom, noticing my entrance, looked up from her morning ritual of arranging a bright bouquet of wildflowers on the table and greeted me with a smile that seemed to radiate warmth. We sat together over breakfast, and with each bite, I could sense a new current flowing through our dialogue. My parents were no longer just the guardians of my childhood, they were becoming partners in discovery, sharing their own experiences with books and stories that shaped their understanding of the world. It felt refreshing to dive into discussions about themes of humanity, society, and the myriad emotions that literature can evoke. My mom spoke passionately about a book she had recently read, one that dealt with the struggles of inner identity, while my dad recounted his youth, the challenges he faced, and how a simple novel had provided him solace during difficult times. Their stories alternated like a harmonious dance, weaving together our past and present in a new narrative tapestry infused with honesty and vulnerability. I couldn't help but marvel at how my once solitary escape into these worlds now had the potential to deepen my relationships. As the days turned into weeks, our family dinners evolved into literary discussions, each session igniting laughter and thoughtful exchanges, where we dissected characters and plots as if they were family members we were getting to know. My parents often encouraged me to share insights from the books I was reading on my own, and I accepted this challenge with relish. The more I expressed myself, the more the barriers I had felt began to dissolve, replaced by a buoyancy of mutual respect that transformed our dynamics. I discovered a deep, collective joy in these moments, the kind that fosters a profound sense of belonging. One evening, after discussing the fine line between courage and foolishness found within a particular story, my mom turned to me, her eyes glimmering with unshed tears. "Thank you for trusting us," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Your honesty opened doors we didn't even know were closed." Her words struck me with such weight, I measured their impact against my fears, realizing how misguided I had been to think that my concerns would render our family fragile. As I began to pen down my musings one quiet night, the diary now filled with memories and reflections, I relished the way words served as both a mirror and a window into my evolving self. I was growing, learning how to embrace the power of truth not just for my sake but for the sake of the love that already enveloped us. And while the act of deception had initially felt like a choice born of fear, the reckoning brought clarity, revealing pathways I could never have envisioned before. Just last week, we gathered in the living room to host a movie night inspired by a classic we had all read together. As the opening credits rolled, I caught my dad grinning as he nudged my mom, whispering a particularly funny line to her that had caught his fancy from the book. That shared chuckle was electrifying, a poignant moment that affirmed what we had built, a space where laughter and the wisdom of stories intermingled freely, a sanctuary for our expressions. As we settled in to watch, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me, realizing that within those walls, we had created a fortress of understanding forged through the power of narrative. As my eyelids grew heavy against the backdrop of flickering images and communal laughter, I felt comforted by the thought that my journey had only just begun, that there were more chapters yet to unfold, rich with the echoes of voices we love and lessons that continue to challenge and inspire us. And in that tranquil embrace of twilight, I drifted into sleep, dreaming of adventures yet to be written together, knowing that the words would flow between us and carry us forward in the intricate tapestry of our lives. It's the kind of story that haunts you in quiet moments, creeping up like the long shadows of dusk before night sets in. As a child, I found solace in the laughter of my friends at the little coffee shop on Elm Street, a place that always felt like home, with its aromatic blend of roasted beans and warm chatter wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. It was a simple life, a predictable circle of mundane joy, until that one evening, everything unraveled in just a heartbeat, leaving a residual ache that I still can't shake off. The moment came disguised as an innocent game of truth or dare. We were a collection of seniors reveling in the fleeting days of high school camaraderie, brimming with carefree energy. Daring one another had always brought us closer, forging bonds that felt unbreakable, but that night, I observed my best friend, Ravi, as he tightened his grip on his trusty phone, the flickering screen illuminating his face with a glow that seemed to carry a hidden weight. When it was his turn, the laughter still buzzing in the air like the last remnants of summer, Ravi chose truth, a decision steeped in our usual banter until suddenly, someone muttered an offhand comment about his girlfriend Amanda, a girl who radiated kindness like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. It was offbeat but lighthearted, poking fun at a moment when she had been a bit too giddy at a party, wearing an outrageous chicken costume, and it spiraled into tossing harmless jabs back and forth, the room charged with laughter, yet Ravi's expression shifted so swiftly, it caught me off guard. The playful air turned dense, heavy with unsaid words, and there it was, the flicker in his eyes, a mix of hurt and anger that crackled like a low flame, a precursor to a storm we didn't see coming. He could have laughed it off, we all wanted him to, but instead, he threw caution to the wind and blurted out words that shattered the atmosphere, revealing a dark thread running through his relationships. "Do you know, sometimes I think she's just using me to fill a space in her life. And that chicken suit? I wouldn't be surprised if it was to highlight how foolish we are together." The statement hung in the air, thick and suffocating, every laughter instantaneously dying away as a bitter silence enveloped us. I remember feeling my stomach drop, my heart racing because I recognized the sudden change in the room's energy. I wanted to shake him, to pull him back from the brink, but those words slipped out so easily, like peeling a dried leaf, revealing the fragile stem beneath. We all sat there, frozen, as Amanda's face drained of color. The laughter had transformed into a silence that felt like a chain tightening around our necks. The subsequent moments played out like a slow-motion disaster. Amanda's eyes filled with a cocktail of confusion and hurt, a raw look that carved itself deep in my memory. In that blink of time, Ravi had effectively mishandled a relationship built on laughter and mutual support, devolving it into a series of insidious doubts and criticisms. I watched as Amanda left, her footsteps echoing softly against the pavement outside the cafe, the door a barrier between the normalcy we had known and the aftermath of one careless moment. Ravi, once buoyant and secure, was suddenly a hollow version of himself, guilt creeping in like a thief under the cover of night. The lively chatter between us evaporated, replaced with awkward glances and fidgeting hands, an innocent game transformed into the catalyst for his unraveling. Days turned into weeks, and it wasn't long before the repercussions spiraled like a whirlwind. Ravi couldn't face Amanda after that, buried under a blanket of guilt and frayed nerves, and his isolation became palpable. He missed her laughter, her light, and maybe that's what made it worse, watching him realize that his careless words had shattered the bond they had crafted with so much joy. I remember sitting beside him in our usual booth, the shadow of that night lurking between us, like an unwanted guest, as he stared out the window, lost in a different kind of game. Friends tried to reach out, tried to talk to him, but he retreated further into himself, crafting barriers where there once were connections. I wrestled with my own emotions, feeling helpless, wishing I could rewind the past and snatch those words from the air like fluttering leaves caught in the wind. As time went on, I noticed that the laughter we once shared transformed into whispers behind closed doors, and eventually, Ravi drifted away from the circle entirely, a ghost to the faces he once knew. The realization struck me heavy, like the turning of a page that would never be read again. In just a matter of minutes, he not only ruined a relationship but also splintered his sense of self and our friendship, as if he'd unwittingly untied a knot that bound our lives together. Reflecting on it now, I can't help but wonder how different things might have been had he chosen a different path that night, had he opted for a lighter dare instead of bearing his insecurities and fears. In this quiet wrinkle of my memory, Ravi's story serves as a subtle reminder of the power words hold, their potential to uplift or pierce through the fabric of our lives, demonstrating how swiftly life can change when we least expect it, leading to inevitable reflections on what we hold dear and the fragility of our connections. As for Ravi, well, he eventually reached out to me on a rainy evening several months later, after countless days of silence, stating simply, "I hope she'll forgive me," and in response to those words, I found myself still hanging tight to the echoes of laughter, forever wishing for a reunion over that familiar cup of coffee. I could only nod, realizing that sometimes, restoring those broken bridges takes time and effort, and perhaps, a willingness to confront the truth we buried under layers of regret. As the droplets danced rhythmically against my window that night, I couldn't shake the memories of the last time Ravi and I had met, echoes of laughter and shared stories still lingering in the corners of my mind. It had been during that warm afternoon in late spring, the sunlight filtering through the lush trees of the tiny cafe where we often spent our weekends. We were carefree then, lost in conversation about our dreams, interspersed with plans of adventure that felt infinite in their potential. But as life often does, it yanked us from that blissful inertia into a reality rife with choices, each one a fork in the road waiting to be taken. The shift had been sudden, a phone call, a panicked conversation in hushed tones, and subsequent decisions made in sheer haste. In my naivety, I thought that our bond would weather any storm. Ravi's act of desperation, however, had left a fracture precisely where I least expected it. The message he sent that evening was cradled within the complexities of our shared history. I could feel my heart tugging in two directions, one pulling me toward the past, where everything felt safe and familiar, and the other gnawing at me with the weight of uncertainty. At first, responding felt daunting. I stared at my phone long enough that I could almost hear the ticking of my heartbeat, each pulsation echoing my indecision. Would forgiving him be too easy? Or would it leave me open to more hurt? I thought. Maybe it was me who needed to forgive myself for allowing the facade of invulnerability to blind me to the inherent fragility of human connections. I took a deep breath, recalling the moments we had shared, the ones that had built the foundation of what I thought would last a lifetime. Perhaps the past did not hold the power to define our future. I finally typed out, "It's not about forgiveness, Ravi. It's about understanding and finding a way to move forward." The flickering light from the street cast transient shadows across my living room, and in that stillness, I could almost hear the past whispering to me, urging for closure. Days turned into weeks as we exchanged texts, dismantling the walls of tension brick by brick. Eventually, we found ourselves face to face once again, under the same old cafe awning, its familiar aroma of brewing coffee rising to greet us. The conversation felt a bit stilted at first, but as we sipped our drinks, the laughter began to trickle back into our repartee like a slow, steady stream. We ventured into conversations that unearthed buried feelings, explored regrets as carefully as one might sift through old photographs, trying to make sense of it all. As Ravi shared his experience of that life-altering decision, the clarity of his remorse wove through each word, heavy with the knowledge that it was not just his life that had unraveled in minutes, it was a tapestry of bonds, trust, and affection that had hung precariously on a wall shared with many, and in that intricately woven space was the reality of pain and healing that sometimes felt insurmountable. Listening to him, I couldn't help but feel a collective understanding that our stories, while undeniably personal, belong to a more universal narrative, a dance between love and loss, hope and despair. Each experience echoed the knowledge that we are all just trying to navigate our paths through this chaotic symphony called life. Hours melted away as we reminisced, our laughter enveloping the cafe, which seemed to cradle us in its familiar embrace. Perhaps the most liberating moment came when I noticed that, in allowing ourselves to confront the past, we had freed the present to shine through, unburdened. There was a sense of grace and understanding that connections, while fragile, also hold immense strength when nourished with communication, empathy, and honesty. As I walked home that evening, I carried with me a renewed hope, a subtle but undeniable shift in my heart. I had learned that time holds a certain magic. It doesn't eliminate pain, but rather, teaches us to cohabitate with it, redefining what it means to forgive and be forgiven. Whether or not our paths would run parallel again, I felt lighter, as if the shadows that had quietly lingered were finally beginning to lift. Perhaps there would come a day when Ravi and I would share another cup of coffee, this time a celebration of resilience, a testament to our journeys filled with missteps leading to redemption. Or perhaps, in the grand tapestry of life, we would simply find ourselves caught by chance in the tapestry of moments, still reaching out for those bridges, a little more tender than before, understanding of the immense fragility that we all shared. It was a realization that life is but a flicker of time, a collection of minutes where decisions can break intricate patterns or redirect them towards new beginnings, and ultimately, we become the authors of our own stories. The week following Ravi's message, as the rain drizzled down my window and formed little rivers that traced irregular paths down the glass, I felt a profound shift in my heart. The gray clouds outside reflected the mixture of uncertainty and hope swirling inside me. I thought about how quickly things can spiral, how, in mere moments, a decision can cascade, changing everything that follows. Ravi had not only lost a relationship, he had unwittingly set off a chain reaction that upended his life and the lives of those around him. The regret in his voice that night lingered in my mind like an echo, a reminder of the precariousness of every choice we make. I imagined him in that coffee shop where we shared countless laughs, now perhaps sitting alone, sipping something bitter while staring into nothingness. I remembered a time, long before his fall from grace, when we sat at that same cafe, our dreams spilling over our mugs as we plotted our futures with an eagerness that seemed to belong only to the young and unburdened. But life has a way of catching up with you, I mused. Often when you least expect it. I decided then to reach out, to suggest we meet. Surely, there was healing in confronting the past, in standing side by side and daring to speak of what had happened, rather than letting it hang in the air like that final, awkward question before a departure. It took only a short message, a casual invitation framed in care and the memories of laughter, for him to respond with enthusiasm laced with a weariness that told me he had been waiting for this moment. We settled on a small, quaint cafe, the kind that held the charm of an old friend, the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods wafted through the air, wrapping around us like a warm embrace. When I arrived, I spotted him at our usual table, a slightly worn look on his face, a testament to both time and the struggles that occupied it. The once vibrant spark in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a glimmer of hope tucked behind a veil of regret. As we exchanged pleasantries and sat down, the air felt thick, charged with unspoken words and a potent mix of what-ifs. I couldn't help but notice how we both had changed. The innocence of our younger selves seemed impossibly distant. "I've been thinking a lot about that night," he began, his voice barely a whisper, and I could sense the weight of the walls around his heart crumbling slowly. We revisited memories, the good and the painful, and somewhere amidst the stream of shared laughter and sorrow, there emerged a fragility more profound than I ever anticipated. Ravi confessed how one misstep transformed his once promising future into an abyss of sadness, a single night where poor choices redefined his relationships and shattered long-held dreams. He spoke of his wake-up calls, the sleepless nights, and the relentless thought of how he had torn apart the very threads that connected him to the people who mattered most. I listened, each word a brushstroke painting the stark rawness of his journey, one that had changed him in ways I could scarcely comprehend. Yet amidst the confessions, I also felt a stirring of admiration for the courage he displayed in standing before me, owning his mistakes with humility rather than bitterness. As the conversation deepened, narratives intertwined, and we rediscovered that the essence of our friendship remained intact, nestled under layers of experience and time like treasures forgotten yet cherished. The moment felt electric, transformative even, as we gradually ventured into those tender territories of forgiveness and understanding. I could finally voice how I had felt during those haunting months of silence, how the echoes of our camaraderie had haunted me in odd moments, how easy it had been to slip into narratives of anger and resentment instead of compassion and patience. His eyes reflected understanding, and we both recognized the beauty and acceptance in recognizing our human flaws. By the end of our conversation, something shifted in both of us, an unspoken agreement that healing wasn't about erasing the past but about embracing it, weaving it into our ongoing saga rather than letting it define us. As I stood to leave, I looked back at him, a smile breaking over my face, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt light, untethered from the burden of past mistakes. We exchanged promises to meet again, and reluctantly, I watched him leave with a tentative hope stirring in my chest. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the world washed anew, glistening under a timid sun breaking through the clouds, much like us. As I walked home, I reflected on our meeting. Life is indeed a series of fleeting minutes, and in every one of those moments, we are granted the chance to reclaim what was lost, to celebrate resilience, and to recognize that while we may stumble, we always have the power to rise again, a little wiser and a little kinder to ourselves in the face of fragility. There's a saying that suggests the things we buy can sometimes end up owning us, and for years, I was a prime example of that paradox, particularly when it came to the most extravagant and frankly ludicrous purchase of my life, a rare collector's edition of a board game. I still remember the day it happened, sitting on my cramped living room couch as I scrolled through an online auction website in search of something entirely mundane, a gift for my younger brother's birthday. I stumbled across an ad for a pristine, complete version of an obscure game from my childhood, the kind that had long since disappeared from shelves, and I could already smell the nostalgic fumes wafting from that box. The board, so vividly illustrated, beckoned me to dive back into a simpler time, and before I could question my judgment, I placed a bid that spiraled far beyond what I had ever intended to spend. It was a heady rush, fueled by memories of sticky summer afternoons and the laughter of friends crowded around a dining room table, yet I virtually locked myself into a cycle of self-deception, convincing myself that this $1,500 piece of cardboard and plastic would unlock not just a trip to the past, but a way to reconnect with my estranged brother, whom I hadn't seen in years due to a falling out that seemed insurmountable at the time. When the package finally arrived, I was overcome with excitement, but that high quickly dissipated as I realized I didn't know how to bridge the chasm that had formed between us since our father's passing. Still, I forced my hand and decided a game night was in order, diligently calling him and inviting him over, convinced the game was a magical portal through which we could rekindle the connection we had lost. To my surprise, he agreed. The evening unfolded with a mix of awkward silences and forced laughter as we set up the game, the pristine board lying before us like a relic of bygone days. As we began, I could see the memories flickering behind his eyes, but apprehension crept in when I realized he was less interested in the game and more in rekindling our deeper conversation, the one I had been frantically avoiding. The joy the game had promised quickly turned hollow, and soon we were disengaged, our minds elsewhere, but as the hours passed, something unexpectedly changed. During play, the childhood banter started to creep back in, the laughter became more genuine, the stress eased, and I found myself realizing that we were no longer just brothers caught in a messy past, but two people longing for a deeper connection. The game didn't mend everything, but it broke the ice, creating a fragile space for us to talk about our shared grief and the seemingly insurmountable rift it had carved in our relationship. By the end of the night, I could see the faint glimmer of hope in his eyes. We didn't leave as best friends, but we had started taking steps back toward being brothers. Reflecting back on that evening, I couldn't help but feel that the board game had been an immense waste of money in many ways, a fleeting attempt to buy back the love I felt I had lost, but maybe, just maybe, it had been worth every penny for the door it opened to something deeper. Fast forward a few months later, we still hadn't fully repaired the damage, there was still a lot of ground to cover, but we were texting more and even planning another game night. And as for the game itself, It now proudly sits on the shelf as a reminder that sometimes the things we think are just wasteful expenses can turn into the most treasured experiences, and perhaps, the biggest waste wasn't the money spent but the years we let slip by before we faced our fears and reached out. So, in a way, that overpriced collector's edition had much more value than I originally perceived, serving not as an anchor, but as the bridge leading back to my brother, a lesson learned in the most unexpected of ways, and one I carry with me every day. As I look at the collector's edition and the joy it sparked, I can't help but reflect on how much I had overlooked in life before that moment. The gamer's console sits nestled next to dusty board games and old comic books, remnants of childhood joys, waiting to be revisited. At first, I thought my nostalgia was merely a longing for the good old days, an escapism from my daily grind as a marketing coordinator for a tech company that often felt more like a cage than a career. I buried myself in work, burying feelings of disconnection, particularly with Ben, my older brother. He was always there during those carefree days, his laughter echoing through the halls of our small childhood home, two boys sharing dreams over pixelated landscapes and stories of heroism. Somewhere along the way, life had swept us into its chaotic current, and our once vibrant bond began to dull. The whole scenario ignited a fire in me. The moment I popped the disc into my console, trepidation tinged with excitement buzzed through me. I thumbed through the instructions, which curiously reopened shadows and memories of our gaming marathons, how we'd huddled on the couch, every victory celebrated with cheers, every defeat met with contagious laughter. In a fit of impulse, I sent Ben a simple text, "Hey, remember that game we loved as kids?" I got it. The silence that followed felt interminable, yet with every passing hour, the anticipation transformed into anxiety. What if he had moved on? What if he didn't want to reminisce about forgotten afternoons spent battling through virtual worlds? It was a cloudy Sunday when my phone vibrated with a response. To my surprise, it was hesitant and filled with nostalgia. "Yeah, I remember. I'd love to come over and play sometime." My heart raced at the thought of reconnecting. Preparations began, a simple cleaning of my apartment and a trip to the store for snacks. The weight of my apprehension lessened, perhaps because I knew I wasn't just preparing for a game, I was preparing for a reunion, a chance to bridge the gaps we had both let widen. The day arrived, clouds giving way to the soft glow of an autumn sun. When Ben finally stepped through my door, the air felt thick with anticipation. He looked a bit older, the kind of age that comes with grown-up responsibilities, but his grin was the same. It was a little awkward at first, small talk peppered with quiet memories, but then, as the game loaded and our avatars appeared on the screen, laughter began to pour out as easily as it had all those years ago. The screen reflected not just our characters, but the brothers we used to be, fearless and united against any challenge. Time melted away as we navigated the game's world, reliving old strategies and sharing stories from our lives, each tale reconnecting pieces of our diverged paths. The more we played, the lighter the conversation became, peeling back layers of hurt, disappointment, and misunderstandings that lingered between us like an unspoken truce. I could feel my heart swell as nostalgia danced in the air, wonder replacing the sorrow of neglected years. In that moment, no overpriced game could feel like a waste, it had become the undeniable catalyst for healing. And with every level we conquered together, we also conquered the past, transforming it from a burden into a shared journey, something to be appreciated rather than regretted. When we finally stepped away from the screen, it was dark outside, the only light coming from the moon hanging silently above us. I could sense a change in Ben, a weight lifted that he didn't even know he was carrying. We sat side by side, finishing off the last of the snacks, our earlier inhibitions gone, our laughter echoing in the cozy silence. In the days and weeks that followed, our Wednesday night gaming sessions became something we both looked forward to, a rekindled tradition. Each week, we navigated through new worlds and battled countless foes, each session solidifying our connection further. I realized, in those quiet moments of gaming and sharing, that it wasn't just about escapism. It was about allowing ourselves to be vulnerable again, to open doors we thought were forever shut. Ben and I began to share more about life, our struggles at work, relationships, and the hopes we had for the future, the laughter transforming into heartfelt conversations we had long neglected. As I now sit here recalling all of this, I recognize it wasn't just the game that was overpriced, but the years we let slip by in silence. Yet how beautifully ironic it was that a seemingly trivial purchase had sparked the most precious gift. It had led us back to each other. The lesson, indeed, was invaluable, a reminder that sometimes, in the chase of adulthood, we forget to invest in the relationships that matter most. So here I am, the collector's edition game now more than just a forgotten relic, it's a bridge to shared moments, a reminder of how time can be reclaimed. As I hit the lights and settle down for sleep, I can't help but smile, feeling grateful for what once seemed like a waste of money transformed into a treasured investment in love and laughter. And perhaps it's appropriate that I leave this story, not in solitude but with a broader message. Sometimes it takes a little push, a reminder, a ridiculous purchase, to face our fears, reconnect, and revive the bonds that make life worth living. Update: just yesterday, Ben texted me, a simple message that brimming with excitement. Guess what? I found an old console in the attic. Let's have a retro game night next week. And as I felt the flutter of anticipation spark again, I couldn't help but think, sometimes, it's the simplest of things that remind us of the biggest joys, often hiding in plain sight, waiting patiently to be rediscovered. As I sat on my couch, my phone still warm from the recent text, I couldn't shake the anticipation swirling in my chest. Ben, my brother, and I had spent countless hours lost in the worlds of chunky pixels and vibrant retro soundtracks, our laughter echoing through the living room as we battled pixelated monsters and solved puzzles together. Those golden days slipped away, buried beneath the weight of life's demands and the silence that had stretched between us over the years, a silence that seemed to expand the longer we avoided acknowledging it. But now, with his simple invitation, a door to the past nudged open, and I felt a wave of warmth wash over me. I could almost hear our old melodies, the triumphant victory music from that one game that had always been our favorite, the soundtrack of childhood. It beckoned me, coaxing me out of my present worries and back into those carefree moments where nothing else mattered but the next level. The week leading up to our retro game night felt almost surreal. I scoured online marketplaces for vintage snacks to recreate that nostalgic atmosphere, the cheesy puffs and sticky sweet sodas we used to consume in careless abandon. With each item I ordered, I felt like I was piecing together a time capsule, a small celebration of all we had, and all we almost lost. Occasionally, I would replay our last encounter in my mind, the unspoken words hanging in the air laden with years of unshed tears and frustrations. I could hear my own thoughts, criticizing myself for letting so much time slip away even as I felt the tight-knit fabric of our bond beginning to mend, one thread at a time. Finally, the day of the game night arrived. I prepared the living room like a scene out of one of those cheesy romantic films, couch cushions tossed aside, the old console hooked up to the TV, and munchies laid out in carefully curated chaos, just like the good old days. When Ben showed up, a slight nervousness tugged at my stomach. What if the years had changed him? What if awkward silence replaced the laughter? He walked in, his eyes darting around as they landed on the setup. "You went all out, didn't you?" Ben laughed, a sound I had missed so dearly, and just like that, the tension eased. As we sat down on the floor, surrounded by the familiar scent of cheesy snacks and the glow of the screen, I felt the years peel away. We started with a game, and I watched as he instinctively placed his hands on the controller, a glint of competitive desire sparking in his eyes. I remembered this. I remembered him. We fell into a rhythm, laughter bubbling up freely as we shared stories about our lives, his exciting new city adventures and my mundane workdays, but what mattered was our willingness to share once again. I could feel the crack forming in the wall we'd built, our words smoothing the edges of misunderstandings long past. "Do you remember?" he would ask, his voice trailing off like a nostalgic melody, and I'd smile, reminding him of the time we lost our save file on a particularly hard level and how we wept for hours over pixelated losses. Hours passed as the night slipped away, each round blurring into the next, our collective laughter filling the air like music, enchanting and bittersweet. Shadows lengthened as we explored past worlds long forgotten, but every level we conquered felt like not just a nostalgic journey of pixels but the beginnings of a new era for us. At one point, I looked over at Ben as we both burst into laughter over an inside joke from a long-lost game. It brought tears of joy to my eyes. I realized that the biggest waste was never the money spent on that collector's edition. It was the regret of lost time, the bitter reality of so many moments I thought were too late to reclaim. As we finally put the games away, I felt a surge of gratitude crash over me. Ben flopped back onto the couch, his head tilted back while a blissful smile lingered on his face. "We should do this more often," he said, and it struck me as both a suggestion and a promise. I nodded, feeling the warmth of connection wrap around us, knowing that we'd let this night become a new chapter, the kind I had almost forfeited through years of silence and distraction. I finally understood the true value behind that wasteful purchase. It wasn't the game but what it led us to, the reclaiming of time, the rediscovering of bonds. How about we make a plan for every month? I suggested, my heart racing at the prospect of future adventures and memories waiting to be forged. The conversation flowed seamlessly from there, possibilities unfolding like a blooming flower. And as I got up to grab more snacks, the sound of his laughter still echoing in my ears, I felt light and optimistic, a grounded sign that the burdens of the past would not define us. Sometimes, it turns out, in the most unexpected corners of our lives, we find threads of connection waiting to be woven anew, just waiting for us to take a leap and reach out, echoing the broader message that life should be lived, explored, and above all, shared with those we love. Update: since that magical night, Ben and I have instated a regular gaming evening, retro games, new releases, and even board games to shake things up. With every session, we laugh louder and talk deeper, and on a whim, last month, we even invited some old friends to join us. Suddenly our humble living room felt like a reunion of sorts. I often think how that one impulsive purchase opened the floodgates of joy, helping us reclaim not just our relationship but the essence of what it means to share moments together. Sometimes, the things we dread, the conversations we put off, can become the brightest chapters in a story we're still writing. And while we've had our challenges, I know one truth for certain: it's never too late to start anew, one game, one laugh, one memory at a time. It was a standard Friday night at our house, and the air was thick with the smell of freshly baked brownies and popcorn that I had just finished tossing in the air fryer. As the matriarch of my family and an ever-dedicated team mom for my daughter's softball squad, I thought I was hitting all the right notes. We had a sleepover planned for the girls after practice, a popular tradition that usually saw kids raiding our pantry for snacks until someone inevitably flops into a sugar coma. I had decided to swing for the fences this time, metaphorically speaking, with a spread that I thought would resonate: chips, soda, candy, you name it, everything I deemed fun and sleepover worthy. But as the girls poured in, all giggles and energy, my heart sank a little when I caught sight of one of the other moms standing by the snack table with a look of horror etched across her face. "Oh wow, I didn't think we were having a junk food party," she quipped with a tight smile, and it felt like the air had stopped circulating for a moment. You see, this particular mom, Lisa, prided herself on health. She lectured everyone during meetings about nutrition and how vital it was for our children, especially athletes, to have the right fuel. My mind started racing. Was I actually doing something wrong? The girls, oblivious to the tension brewing, dug into the snacks with glee, but I felt undeniably uneasy. I recalled when I was a kid, and sleepovers were a chaotic mix of soda and treats, with laughter drowned out only by the sound of a completely exhausted mom trying to keep the volume down. So why did it feel different now, like I was some villain for wanting my daughter to just enjoy the simplicity of junk food at a sleepover? As Lisa continued to sip on her herbal tea and lecture the other moms who didn't seem too worried, my anxiety turned into a defensive flare-up, and I could feel myself brimming with irritation. I finally blurted out something like, "It's just one night, and they deserve to have fun." But instantly regretted it when Lisa gave me that classic "I'm disappointed" look. The girls continued munching away, but I, unfortunately, was caught in a spiral of doubt, wondering if maybe I had put the ultimate parental foot wrong by not adhering to a strict playbook of health guidelines that I never signed up for. The tension in the air grew, and as the night wore on, I kept picturing the conversations that were taking place behind my back. Would they question if I was a good mom for allowing this? Did they think I didn't care about their health? As the girls shouted for comedies in the living room, my heart softened thinking about the laughter I had intended to cultivate with my choices. Moments passed, and they were bouncing off walls, connecting in joy. It ignited a flicker of comfort in my chest, until out of the blue, one of the girls, Emma, threw up after a particularly spirited burst of sugary energy. Chaos erupted. Lisa whipped around dramatically as if I were solely responsible for this culinary catastrophe, which only fueled the anxiety swirling within me. As I cleaned up the mess with 1,000 apologies spilling from my lips, I caught a glimpse of the other mother's stifling laughter, and I realized that my fears of being judged might have been blown way out of proportion. I discovered that Lisa's health obsession didn't resonate with a lot of the other moms who craved a little levity amidst the grind of competitive youth sports. By the end of the night, even Lisa was helping me, albeit reluctantly, while still casting judgmental glances, and I found solace in my daughters hugging me tightly. "That was fun, Mom," she said, and in that moment, I realized something vital. Parenting doesn't come with a defined manual, and sometimes you just need to let kids be kids, even if it means extra junk on a special night. I went to bed that night reflecting on how our choices shape our children's memories, and I fell asleep wondering if Lisa's comments would still sting in the morning. In the weeks that followed, I did have conversations with other parents that highlighted varying opinions about nutrition and fun, and while a few still sided with Lisa, many came to my defense, sharing that they, too, remember the sheer joy of junk food and chaos from their own childhoods. I found a cool balance moving forward, incorporating a mix of healthier snacks into the mix while preserving those nostalgic treats, and reminded myself that while we all want the best for our kids, fun and freedom have their own essential place in growing up. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, there's more than one way to be a good mom, one that includes a little more love and a little less judgment. Reflecting on that night, I felt an array of emotions swirling inside me, a blend of relief and residual tension that lingered long after the sleepover chaos had faded. The laughter and the smell of popcorn had long been replaced by the soft hush of the night, but the lingering whispers of doubt still echoed in my mind. Sure, I'd found a way to balance the snacks, but a part of me wondered if I had truly won any battle. Why was I so shaken by Lisa's opinion? I prided myself on being a laid-back mom, one who encouraged fun and creativity, yet here I was, caught up in a whirlwind of guilt over a plate piled high with nachos and gummy bears. Later that week, as I drove the girls to practice, I noticed something in the rearview mirror. My daughter Amelia, perched in the back seat with her friends, was laughing uncontrollably over some inside joke, her face lit up like a Christmas tree. That simple joy made my heart swell. In that moment, I realized I was the architect of those giggly memories. I had chosen to let them have that vibrant night, embracing the wild spirit of childhood. Yet, I couldn't help but glance up at the school in front of me, wondering if tomorrow it would be a soft reminder of Lisa's judgment or a celebration of my commitment to being a good mother. One evening, while sorting through Amelia's backpack, I stumbled upon a handwritten note. It was a small, folded piece of paper, and my curiosity pricked at me. I opened it, and there in her familiar scrawl was a thank you note that made my heart ache with sweetness. Thank you for the best sleepover ever, Mom. You let me have fun and brought smiles to my friends' faces. In that moment, everything came rushing back, the messy fun, the laughter, the absurdity of our midnight snack creations. My heart tightened, a wave of gratitude washed over me, reminding me how becoming a mother had transformed my perspective. As the weeks rolled on, something remarkable happened. I began embracing the idea that nurturing wasn't always about strictness, that it could coexist with silliness, an epiphany that settled comfortably in my mind. The days became a warm embrace of mixed snacks, Saturday movie marathons, and occasional baking soirees where the only rule was if it doesn't look good, it still tastes amazing. It's funny how a sleepover, and all the drama that came with it, could circle back into something nourishing, filling the gaps with laughter rather than tracking rules. With time, I learned to tune out Lisa's opinions and forge my own version of motherhood, one where every smile my daughter wore was worth its weight in sugar. I'd texted Lisa a few times since then, bridging our conversation with casual updates about practice and games, and while she remained polite, the tension between us lingered like an awkward dance. Sometimes, though, I still questioned if I was being too lenient or allowing too much chaos, yet I realized a little chaotic fun, even in the form of junk food, was a gift I was proud to give. On a Sunday afternoon, I brought out the rainbow sprinkles and ice cream, throwing an impromptu ice cream social for Amelia and her friends. They squealed with delight as the ice cream dripped and the sprinkles cascaded over piled high cones. Each burst of laughter felt like a gentle reminder, every day doesn't need to fit into a mold, every meal doesn't need to be perfect. Instead, I learned to celebrate this wild, messy, beautiful phase called childhood, where chaos had its rightful place alongside lessons of moderation. So, was I really the asshole for that sleepover? Maybe a little for being too concerned about the opinions of others, but not for letting my daughter revel in a night of joy. In the grand picture of life, it turned out that love, laughter, and a little sprinkle of chaos were all essential ingredients in crafting lasting memories. As I watched Amelia laugh and play with her friends, effortlessly lost in their bubble of happiness, I knew I was okay with all the contradictions and complexities of parenthood. At the end of the day, I was simply doing my best, and that felt perfect enough. As I settled into the comfortable chaos of our living room, a wave of relief washed over me. The night had transformed from a battlefield of expectations into a tapestry woven with laughter, illuminated by the sporadic bursts of giggles that echoed against the walls, clashing against my doubts like fireworks in the night sky. I sat back on the couch, an oversized bowl of popcorn nestled on my lap, my heart swelling as I observed Amelia and her friends sprawled out across the floor, their individual quirks forming a beautiful mosaic of childhood. I baked those brownies with chunks of chocolate that probably had more sugar than cocoa. They'd turned out to be a hit, their sweet scent melding with the salty popcorn and cheesy nachos that we all started burying ourselves in. Yet, there was still that niggling thought, that seed of insecurity stemming from my conversation with Lisa. Did I really go too far in choosing the menu for the sleepover? Were my intentions, initially pure and joyful, overshadowed by my worry of not fitting the mold of what a responsible mom should be? I wanted to be an influential figure in their lives, an anchor they could return to, but here I was, casting aside the boundary of moderation in this one small area. As much as I prayed my daughter wouldn't be consumed by the judgments of others, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd somehow let her down by embracing the fun side of food instead of becoming the health-conscious mom. But then I looked again. The sight before me, a pile of pillows and blankets, laughter spilling into every corner, was a reminder of the freedom I'd wanted for her. Each girl had a slice of pizza in one hand and a brownie in the other, cheeks smeared with splotches of melted chocolate. Their bond over those treats felt sacred, a moment stolen from the everyday obligations of being children. I recalled my own sleepovers filled with late-night snacks and whispered secrets, how those nights had cajoled the stars out of me, age-old friendships cemented over laughter and late-night debates about which boy band was the best. "Can we have a dance party next?" Amelia suggested, lighting up with that uncontainable energy only youth can possess. The girls erupted into an agreement, and they jumped to their feet like a pack of puppies. I laughed. A dance party wasn't exactly part of the itinerary. But then, what's an itinerary when you're young and alive? As the music started blaring from the speaker, I got up to join them, hesitant at first, but willing to let the rhythm sweep me into their world. I swung my arms, letting go of any remaining self-consciousness while they twirled around me, losing themselves to the beat. For a brief moment, I was that age again, slipping into the simplicity of life without the weight of judgment. The laughter morphed into a chorus of delight, and in that dance, I felt the gentle reminder that while structure is essential, spontaneity breathes life into our existence. Just then, my phone buzzed, and it was a text from Lisa. "Hey, I've been thinking about what you said and I wanted to apologize for being judgmental. You're doing great, and maybe I have some things to work on too." A warmth spread through me. Maybe my heart wasn't racing as much from my worries tonight. Maybe, just maybe, in this complex world, we were all navigating something wholly imperfect together. As I hit reply, I felt resolute. "Thank you, Lisa. We all have our style. Let's collaborate on the next sleepover." The night wore on, a gentle spiral into laughter and camaraderie. As the girls eventually flopped down onto sleeping bags, sleepy-eyed and full of sugar, I knew that in that moment, I'd created a safe space for them to breathe, to thrive. I slipped into my own refuge of reflection, accepting that I was not just a mom who fed her kids junk food but a creator of memories, a guardian of joy. Behind the cozy chaos, love had poured in, filling every corner. And in that messy, beautiful night, I learned once more that sometimes being the best parent means letting go of the whole right and wrong approach, simply allowing love, laughter, and a sprinkle of fun to lead the way.